Hello, this is Cotton Stoops, and today's video is the 1000 subscriber special where I will be making a set for every single fully evolved event, roamer, and everything in between, such as Shawchi, Gobidemic, and Sherbot, and I'll be making a set for each and every one of them in today's video. Do note that these will only technically have one set, but I will be suggesting alternatives throughout the video and telling you those details for each alternative. Do note that there will be timestamps down below for you to skip to every Loomian because this video is going to be over 3+ hours long and I don't think you guys have the time for that. So with that out of the way, let's start this damn video. So as mentioned, Searknight is going to be running a UU Clever set. This is a bit different from its other fire type counterpart Infernix, as Searknight has the ability to put down hazards and slap down items, which is a pretty good niche in the UU metagame. Not to mention that it can also check better some threats down in UU such as Falkyrie, and you can also run Terrifying if you really want to make sure you have better matchups against stuff like Wendelin, but particularly Clever is going to be the one you want to go for here, as you are pretty much already bulky enough on the melee defense side, and you wall many more ranged Loomians in UU. You also do want to run 36 energy, as this will let you use 3 layers of barbs and a combination of what your other moves will be. 64 melee attack is going to be the leftovers, as we're going to try and max out our HP and range defense stats. Now as for Luminami is going to be wanting to run a melee, or in this case a melee set with Flash and Flee. Melee Luminami doesn't just have more power, it also has more coverage, as Luminami can have dark and ice coverage, which is particularly pretty good. So we're going to be talking about that. 20 energies to get up to 250 energy, so we can consecutively use Flash and Fleas very efficiently. Some other things to know, that you can also use Wave Wreckers in combination with Flash and Fleas, so you can perfectly get to that 0 energy if you do run out. And Brownie Robust is mainly here so you can get that very sluggish negative personality, so we can be as slow as possible. Luminami is going to want as much or not a lot of speed UPs. You want to get this as close to 0 as possible, so Luminami will be guaranteed, or at least close to be guaranteed, to pivot last so your wall breakers can get in safely. 176 HP is pretty much the best or the highest you can go for HP without wasting HP gain from your power napper, and 200 melee defense is just to max that out, and the 104 TPs left are basically leftovers. You can experiment with these TPs to calc different hits if you want to, but this is all you need to know for Luminami. Mysterious Dust will be our main item here because we do not want to get burnt because we are the melee version. If you want to go for heavy armor, then go ahead, you will just have to tweak the TPs a bit. Now for Tahtab's gonna be a pretty versatile Loomian here, not in its set but mainly with its moveset. Timber Thrash and Jungle Jutsu are your strongest stabs, so obviously you'd want these, but Barter, Poison, and Bulk Up can be your remaining moves. Barter is really good on Tahtab, as you can potentially cripple Loomians such as Barblast, Obsidian, and Harvesect, who are common swap-ins for you. Poison can also cripple these guys, but Obsidian does have Beast Slumber and Barblast is immune to that because it's poison. So in my opinion, crippling them with Barter is a lot more consistent at that, but if you want to make a setup Tahtab, then go ahead if you really want to. Its 48 energy TPs will let you use 3 Timber Thrashes, 1 Jungle Jutsu, and 1 Poison. Of course, that Jungle Jutsu can be a barter if you want to. 52 HP are leftovers, and 200 melee attack and speed are to max out our more important stats. Running personalities such as Very Nimble and Very Brawny can also work on Tahtab, but the main thing you want here is to balance out your attack and speed stats, because in my opinion, if you're going Very Nimble with the specialty boots, you're kinda going overboard at that point. Now, as for our Falkyrie set, Falkyrie is going to want 64 energy, so you can use 4 Nova Blasts and 2 pairs of Magnifies. You can of course swap the Nova Blasts for Metal Blasts if you really want to, but Nova Blasts are more damaging moves, so this will be a lot more consistent. 36 HP are the leftovers of course, and maxing out our range attack and speed is our more important stats, as Falkyrie would love to outspeed as much as it can due to its low speed stat. You can run more bulkier forms of Falkyries, more specifically smart clever ones, to help your matchups against specific range attacking Loomian'S, but honestly, Falkyrie doesn't have a lot of time to switch in because of its bad defensive typing, so you want as much damage as possible in the little turns that you're gonna be in. As for personalities, Very Smart is really good as you can maximize your damage output, but in my opinion, the more Loomian'S that have been releasing, they are able to outspeed Very Smart Falkyries, so switching to Smart Nimble throughout the metagame can be a pretty good alternative if you're not being able to outspeed enough. And as for your moveset, Metal Blast and Nova Blast will obviously be your 2 main stab moves. Magnify is pretty good here because you will be able to set up more damage. Rejuvenate is pretty good for self-sustain, but if you want to run Raging Howl, then go ahead. Especially because Chartiki is being a lot more common here, so this will be pretty good if you are running Raging Howl. However, if you are running Raging Howl, you would want to run a Typeless Essence in my opinion, but without Raging Howl, Metal Essence is the best way to go, as this is more consistent than throwing out Nova Blasts, as Nova Blast can be absorbed by plant types, and Awakening is our ability of choice here because it is our most best ability for maxing out damage. For Vesperatu, the energy TPs of 48 will let you use around 4 slapdowns, and the rest can be shadow sprints. Now for Vesperatu, Vesperatu has a very versatile moveset here because of the amount of sharpens that it can possibly throw out, Slash being an important thing in this metagame because of Tiklipse, Shadow Sprints to revenge kill Loomian'S, Phantom Slash for a pretty good Spirit Stab. There are just a bunch of things you really want on your Vesperatu. However, in my opinion, 4 moves will be enough, mainly because Vesperatu is an offensive threat anyway. If you want some longevity, then running Revival will be really good for Vesperatu. However, if you are running Revival, you would rather have a more bulkier Vesperatu just so it can actually make use of Revival, because Vesperatu for offensive sets is pretty frail on the range defense side. It's barely gonna have enough time to Revival up. You'd rather just do as much damage as you can with your Vesperatu. Personalities can consist of Very Brawny, such as the set, or Brawny Nimble and Very Nimble. Very Nimble is pretty good for outspeeding the stuff that can outspeed you in your speed tier, such as Nemare, but at that point, it's not really the best because you sacrifice most of your damage output. Do note that your melee attack is 110, which is not nearly as much as most melee wall breakers. Sharp Claws will be our ability of choice here, mainly because we can boost all of our moves with Sharp Claws, and Sharp Claws just has a little bit more damage scaling than Awakening. And the item of choice will be Dark Essence, since we're going to be clicking slapdowns most of the time because we can remove items. Himbrr is a lot more simple here as it follows the 20 energy rule. This will let you have 250 energy in level 50 battles to spam 5 Ice Hammers or 5 Earthquakes, or a mixture of the both. Since Himbrr doesn't really have a quote-unquote defined moveset, you can run utility moves such as Icicle Traps to set up your own, which is pretty good because you can catch opposing Gargolem forms, Setamars, Nevermares, and other stuff off guard. And Mudslide is, in my opinion, a pretty underrated move for Himbrr because it can get rid of Icicle Traps or hazards such as those, and barbs and poison barbs and such more. And of course, Ice Hammer and Earthquake are your main stab moves. Personalities will always be Very Brawny if you're going to be an offensive Himbrr, and in my experience, Himbrr does way too much damage to miss out on that. and your negative personalities will of course be sluggish because you don't really care about your speed tier too much. You can't put 80 into speed just so you can maximize your speed tier and outspeed some other stuff. But honestly, this isn't really too important as the stuff in your speed tier you'll already kind of beat. Your ability of choice will be Awakening. I guess you can try running Staunch on more defensive Himbrrs, but there are really not a lot of low decreasing moves in this metagame to warrant that. And your item of choice will be Ice Essence, mainly because Earthquake does get absorbed by air types. So running Ice Essence is much more consistent because you'd still be doing damage with Ice Hammer and not having to be worried about Loomian absorbing that Ice Hammer. And finally, our final starter is Zuelong, who's going to be running the 20 energy, so we can use 5 Zip Zaps, 5 Thunder Strikes, or 5 Fire Breaths, or a mixture of the 3. This is pretty good on Zuelong because, in my opinion, 4 attack Zuelong is the best attack Zuelong because you do have, because for the earth types that are immune to Zip Zap, you can either hit them back super effectively, i.e. Tyrex, or you can swap out. So it's just up to personal preference. I personally prefer more Zip Zaps because it does do damage and can oppress the team or the opposing team, instead of Ancient Roar where you're just gonna go into something that's gonna like the matchup against the opponent and they're just gonna switch out even though, so they're just gonna switch out for free at that point with no damage taken. Zip Zap, in my opinion, is a little bit better because of that. The ability of choice will be Brute Force. While you do sacrifice the possibilities of paralyzing or burning your opponents, this is a lot more better because Zuelong won't be used too much in the early and mid game. You'd want to use Zuelong, i.e. a cleaner, in the mid, or not mid, but late to end game. The item of choice will be Ancient Essence because it is our second stab and it is a lot more consistent to be throwing out elemental bursts than Thunder Strikes, mainly because Thunder Strike here does get absorbed by earth type moves. And for personality, Smart Nimble is pretty good to keep it consistent, but Zuelong can also run Very Nimble to outspeed Nimble Gobdemics, which don't exist, so Very Nimble isn't really the best right now. But Very Smart can see alternatives here, but overall being consistent in both of the stats you want to max out is pretty much what you want to do. And of course, 80 HP are leftovers. Now, for Umbrat here, Umbrat is a pretty interesting choice of Loomian here, mainly because Umbrat deals a lot of damage and provides utility, but in my opinion, not much people see that. So let's talk about Umbrat here. Umbrat has really good utility as it's the only Loomian in the game right now that has a dark type chase down, and of course Tiklipse doesn't absorb its dark type moves, so you can only resist this thing. While all of its coverage moves are dark type moves, Umbrat does offer a pretty good utility, specifically in UU where Umbrat's more used as it can deal with the plant type walls or stuff that are weak to dark, such as Maumurk. So Umbrat is pretty good down there. It also does offer pretty good teammates as Umbrat does pair really well actually with Falkyrie and Protagon, who are down there currently, so this is pretty good for Umbrat too. Umbrat's gonna want more speed, mainly because you can hit Loomian's down there really well with your Raging Tackle, which is also stabbed because of Overshadow. While there is the argument of running it more defensively by having 200 HP, it is much better to hit Loomian's first rather than last because Umbrat here doesn't really have the best defenses to take hits. And 84 energy is mainly so we can use 1 Raging Tackle, 4 Quick Pounces or Bulk Ups, and 1 Chase Down. Of course, these moves are interchangeable in the order you can do, and you can also tweak the energy to use other moves more consistently, such as Chase Down and Raging Tackle. The energy here is just pretty versatile in what you want to do, and 20 or 200 melee attack and speed are obvious here, and for the HP, 16 HP is just leftovers. The item of choice is Dark Essence. You can run Health Amulet so you can take advantage of your bulk ups more, but in my opinion, Umbrat just wants to do as much damage, get out, and rinse and repeat. Now as for Luxoar, Luxoar doesn't really have the best niche right now, even down in UU, but Luxoar overall does seem to be a decent Lumian, at least on kind of on paper, but really not really. Fire Breath will be your second move option, as Raging Howl and Flash and Flee, you'll probably be clicking this more. Do note that this Luxoar set is specifically a sweeper, so it's mainly going to be one to be used late to endgame, but it can also lead battles and predict swaps with Flash and Flee, so do note that. With its specific moveset in mind, you could use 3 Raging Howls and the rest can be combined with Fire Breaths or Flash and Fleas and Peace of Minds. Personality will be very smart here because in the tiers that it's used in, there's not really a lot of fast Lumians down here, so very smart is very good here. So we can maximize our damage output while still being fast, and 200 speed here is to max out our speed along with our rage attack being 202. Our ability will be Illuminate, so we can make Raging Howl a light type stab move, and our item of choice can be Light Essence. Health Amulet also does work on Luxoar, mainly because it is the sweeper type, and you of course want as much longevity as you can while setting up, but that really isn't essential, so just use Health Amulet for a more important Lumian. Alright, so for Tiklipse is going to be more of a cleaner with this set, but overall this is just an offensive Tiklipse that can set up late to endgame and can do massive damage. Our personality hero will be very smart, Frail Tender. If you don't want to decrease your melee defense and you'd rather use other Lumians, or not other Lumians, other personalities like Smart Nimble to balance out your stats and actually don't get a defense increase, go do that. I wouldn't really recommend Very Nimble because then you just sacrifice all of your power here, so it's not really that worth it. And our ability of course will be Total Eclipse, standard stuff, and our item of choice will be Dark Essence, mainly because Dark Essence does cost less energy because Dark Surge is 40, and it is a lot more consistent to throw these out because nothing is immune to this other than other Eclipses. Disperse will be our setup move. Gamma Pulse, Dark Surge, and Raging Howl. These are going to be our 3 main attacking moves. Raging Howl is here so we can just hit stuff that we can't hit with Gamma Pulse and Dark Surge, mainly other Eclipses. The 44 energy TPs will be able to use 1 Raging Howl, 2 Gamma Pulses, or 1 Gamma Pulse, 2 Disperses, other stuff like that, and the rest will be Dark Surges, specifically 2. Now on to Cynamoth. 84 energy will get us to 250, so we could use 2 Magnifies and a mixtures of Ferroblast and Nature Forces, summing up to 4. Particularly, Cynamoth is not really that great. Its defenses are not the worst, but they're definitely nothing to think positive about. Its rage attack stat is not nearly enough with Magnify to make it actually threatening, and its speed tier for being a massive butterfly is nothing at all. So Cynamoth doesn't really have anything going for it. Our ability Flutter will be able to bypass entry hazards, I'm pretty sure, so that Ice Cold Traps isn't a thing anymore, and our personality will be very smart just so we can deal as much damage as possible, and our Bug Essence Ferroblast is our strongest damaging move. We might as well use it. Now, as for Sumobito as of right now is really not really good at all. It's being outclassed by a bunch of stuff. Its defenses, mainly because of its HP, are not really the best. Its speed tier is also pretty bad, and its defensive typing is nothing to write home about, as this is being hit by a lot of important meta typings such as air and spirit. Sumobito is not really the best right now, but anyways, its TPs of 60 energy to be specific, will let us use 3 parasitizes and 2 counterstances. This can of course be swapped out with poisons and bulk ups. Poison is to cripple the walls that will try to come in, such as mainly really Harvestect, other bug types, and air types, so this will be pretty good for that. Bulk up can set up our damage. You can argue to run a more speedy set and replace Bulk Up for Fire Slam, so we can at least be running boots or something like that to boost our speed. But that's not really the best here, as we might as well take advantage of our low speed stat and go full on bulk, because Sumobito really needs help in that department. Now for Avitross, Avitross does fulfill a really decent role in UU, not really in OU, but in NU it is really good down there. But for its set, its 76 energy will bring us to 248 energy in level 50 battles. This will let us get off 1 Thunder Crash, 2 Brawn boosts, and a mixture of nosedives and driving force. Health Amulet will be the item here just so we can get some recovery, as we're gonna be Brawn boosting up. 128 energy is mainly leftovers here, but this will let us have odd energy overall. 200 melee attack is to be as strong as possible. Brawny, Nimble, very clumsy will be our personalities here, and I'm pretty sure Nimble with the speed here will be able to outspeed Brawny Cosmeors, or Brawny Cosmeor Unleashed to be more specific, and more Loomians around the 100 speed tier, which will help us set up our Brawn boost first or deal damage first, so our recoil moves aren't really as more damaging as they are. And once we rev up, we're going to be outspeeding most non-boot Loomians in the game, so this is going to be pretty good for Avitross. Usually Avitross would be used in the late and end game of matches, so when more things are weakened, it can now set up safely and clean the rest of the team up. So for Swolder, I am going to be making a UU water type check for Swolder, as this does do pretty decently well against non-barter boots, Garlash and Akalos and much more down there. It also does pretty well against Malmerk, but it's really outclassed by not Barblast but Blowtox at the end of the day. So Swolder is not really the best down here. For its energy investment of 36 TPs, it's gonna let you use 2 Rejuvenates, 2 Mega Punches, and 3 Poisons. You can of course mix and match the moves in this order, and the item of Energy Orb will help Swolder's miserable energy stat of 70, because it's so goddamn low. You can barely use anything without Energy Orb. And the ability will be webbing, so we can potentially outspeed or cripple melee wall breakers that are trying to break us. So this is going to be pretty good for Swolder. Just do note that it's not going to be performing as well as some other toxic / bug walls in UU. Now for Florant, Florant's more of the case than Swolder, as Florant doesn't really have a really good niche. I've seen offensive Florants before, but in my opinion, there are not really a bunch of Loomians that can do the stalling that Florant can do. There are other Loomians like Banfino and Spreezy, all those other stuff. But Florant is going to be the generic stall Florant that we've been getting since the beginning of the game, basically. And the energy TPs of 56 will allow us to use 2 life drains and a mixture of poisons, sap plants, and pestilences. Our personality will be very robust because we do have better matchups against melee Loomians, and the ability of choice will be Drainage, and our item of choice will also be Drain Orb, so we can help light drains scale a lot more better, so we can have some longevity. Do notice that we are not running Rejuvenate or Photosynthesis, I'm pretty sure, mainly because Sap Plant and Life Drain in combination together in the right situations, it basically will be more efficient than a Rejuvenate can ever be. And for Terrafly, Terrafly is also outclassed as a melee wall. Mostly all these Gale Forest Loomians are pretty bad here, but overall they're not really the worst things you can use. Terrafly is outclassed by Kanibo, Halvantic, and Barbadger, and probably some other stuff. But if you want to use Terrafly, you want to max out your melee attack and speed. These are your best stats that you can use, and the personality will be Brawny, Nimble, or very nimble if you want to outspeed as much stuff as you can with boots. Because we are running boots, we're going to be running 4 attacks, and these will consist of Wing Slap, Baneful Bash, Parasitize, and Rough Up. These will give us as much coverage as possible so we can at least hit most of the Lumians in front of us super effectively, even if we get the wrong move choice with our boots. And our ability will of course be Ambush, so we can maximize our 1-turn damage as much as possible. So if a wall comes in, then we can potentially deal a lot of damage to them and swap out to our more consistent Lumian that can deal with that wall. And for Terraclaw, Terraclaw isn't really the best for this OU metagame, but Terraclaw can fit in some cores that can help its defenses out a little bit more and the weaknesses that it is weak to. When using Terraclaw, you really want to watch out for hazards such as barbs, more so icicle traps and poison barbs, just anything barb related, because you do not have any form of recovery other than Parasitize. Speaking of Parasitize, your movesets will be Baneful Bash, Eerie Stare, Parasitize, and Rough Up. As far as I know, Terraclaw doesn't have poison to cripple the Lumians, but Eerie Stare does help in some cases, as Lumians such as Falkyrie and some other stuff can set up on you without Rough Up, so Eerie Stare will help with that. Eerie Stare overall is just pretty good to help out your damage output and your matchups against Lumians such as Obsidian, Setamars, and some other stuff, which is pretty good. And your personality will be clumsy, sluggish, very clever. You can run very brawny, so you can max out the amount of HP you can get from Parasitize, but honestly I would rather take advantage of your ability Slick Shell, which will be able to give you double defenses in the ranged defense department. And your item of choice will be Health Amulet, just so you can get up your longevity a little bit more. If you don't have Health Amulet for some reason because another Lumian is using it, I guess I'd use Milkshake, but other than that I wouldn't really use Terraclaw if Terraclaw can't equip the Health Amulet. And for Ragoon, Ragoon is a pretty interesting Lumian because Ragoon here is a stall breaker, and in case you don't know what that does, it doesn't really focus on doing damage, it just tries to cripple the walls as much as possible. This is evident with its ability Burglar, as with any move it clicks other than Provoke, I'm pretty sure. It will just discard the opponent's item, which is very good. Quick Pounce can help use of Burglar, as you can potentially revenge kill some Lumians, but I wouldn't really try on doing that at all. But mostly, if a Lumian's faster than you, use Quick Pounce, as this will get rid of their item. Slap Down will be very useful if you can't click for some reason, just use Slap Down. And if you're not running Burglar, use Slap Down all the time. I wouldn't really recommend that, but Slap Down is just our strongest stab move, and it does remove items in that case, which is very good. For Slap Down, I would really use this against more lower Lumians and Lumians that can just that you underspeed, specifically walls, and Quick Pounce for offensive Lumians that can outspeed you. Chase Down is pretty good here because you can catch Lumians swapping, so if you think a Lumian's gonna swap, their item gets taken away anyway with Chase Down, which is pretty good. And Provoke can stop Lumians from setting up on you, because while Ragoon can cripple Lumians, it is not immune to offensive Lumians, so Provoke is there you go. It also does help you not get walled by Tiklipse in some way, so they can't set up the spurs on you, so that can be good as well. The 200 HP and speed is so we can max these stats out, because you want to tank as much from both defenses as possible. And its speed tier, well, it's pretty good in 90, so you can make it as fast as possible. You can also run Barter Ragoon with Nimble and just get rid of the specialty boots, so that would be pretty good combination if you do want to run that. Robust is mainly here so we can tank melee hits, but ultimately it doesn't really matter. As long as you're running Robust or Clever, it doesn't really matter here. And for its energy, it's going to be a mixture of Quick Pounces, Provokes, and Chase Downs. There aren't really any specific numbers I could give you, mainly because they all work really well. So that's it for Ragoon. Now for Boarrok, Boarrok is going to be a lot more simple. It's going to be running the similar sets that it has been running for quite a while, so I would rather use that other than some other stuff. Some energy, knowledge, to get up to 240. This will let you use 4 earthquakes and 1 mega chomp, or 3 earthquakes and 2 bulk ups and 1 mega chomp. It's really versatile in what you can do here. You can even do 6 mega chomps, but I wouldn't really recommend that. Your 28 HP are leftovers, and the 200 melee attack and speed are to max out your speed and attack stats, because Boarrok here doesn't really have the best defenses to stay in a bunch of the time, so maxing out your speed stat can be pretty good. Your personality will be very brawny, just so you can maximize or lower the chances that your boast won't lower. And your item here won't be specialty boots. I don't know why that says it here. You can run an Earth Essence so you can boost your more stronger stab moves. And yeah, Earthquake, Mega Chomp, Bulk Up, and Quick Pounce are going to be our moveset here. Earthquake is just so we can just do as much damage as possible with our strongest stab. Don't worry about Levitate coming, it's not going to come, so you won't have to replace it for Muck Buck. Mega Chomp is here for the plant types, and Quick Pounce is so we can jump the priority on some other stuff. You can run other items like Raging Tackle and Body Crash. In my own personal opinion, I wouldn't really run Body Crash because it doesn't really help against most Loomians other than typeless types, and typeless types aren't really the most common thing in this metagame. And Raging Tackle, it hurts your longevity more, and while it does help you do your wall breaking job, I'd prefer Quick Pounce so you can at least get some revenge killing in the late game if you are down to that. And now for Eleguana. Eleguana is a pretty underrated Loomian in my opinion. There aren't really a lot of things you can do with its energy stat because it's kind of low, but with this very clever pivot set, you can be as range tanky as possible, and with the energy orb, you can spam as much Flash and Fleas as your heart desires. Flash and Fleas and Tazes will be your main moves to click, and if you want to run double pivot, then I guess you can do that and replace Thunderstrike for Zip Zap. But in my own personal opinion, I would just run Flash and Flea only, because there are specific situations that you'd rather want Thunderstrikes. For example, if you're running Water Loomians or Metal type Loomians, but in my own opinion, I would probably run Zip Zap at the end of the day, mainly because you'd just want to have as much utility on your Eleguana as possible. Like I said, Energy Orb is just to make it so we can spam as much Flash and Fleas as possible, and Prismatic is so we can abuse our ability and swap in on Flash and Fleas, which as of my knowledge are more common than Zip Zap nowadays. But just to make sure, I would rally 2 Eleguanas with Prismatic and the other Lightning Rod, I'm pretty sure. So just make sure whether or not you'd have the right Eleguana for the metagame. Now, for Gastroak here, Gastroak is pretty simple here actually. You just want to run as much HP and range defense as you can, so you can do as much as you can in your range defense department and scale with your stratagem. Speaking of stratagem, Heavy Shield will increase your range defense and of course increase your stratagem, which is always very good. And for your personality, Sluggish, Frail, Very Clever. It's just so you can maximize our range defense. We don't really care about our speed, and we're not of course using any melee attacks here. And Ungracious Host, you can run other abilities, but Ungracious Host is mainly for the Cephalopses that will try to soul drain us. So I'm pretty sure we do live a hit from a soul drain smart Cephalops, so you don't need to run items like Clutch Plushie for that. And as for our energy stat, you're gonna be wanting to run 76 energy TP so we can reach 250 energy in level 50 battles, so we can use 2 photosynthesis and 3 poisons or temps. There's really not a lot of moves that you can switch in or out here. You just want to, in my opinion, for Gastroak at least, you just want to spread as much poison as possible, and if it comes down to it, use your stratagem. For Wiki Wiki here, it's going to be very simple here. There's not a lot of stuff you'd want to do with your Wiki Wiki. Maximize your choice of defense. In this case, it's going to be range defense, mainly because we don't really have the best matchups against melee attacking Loomians, since they're mostly dark types that would hit us super effectively. Just pick your poison here at this point. and the personality of course will be very clever. If you want to run a mixture or a melee focused, of course tweak the personality. The ability of choice will be Noxious Weed, so it can absorb plant type moves and have a little bit more matchups against those. However, if you don't want to do that, then you can run Communication for doubles Wiki Wiki, but we're not really going to be talking about doubles here. The item of choice will be Heavy Shield because we have a bunch of energy. It doesn't really matter what we can do, honestly. And our moveset is Utility Base, Mudslide to get rid of hazards, Poison to spread and cripple Loomian'S, Photosynthesis so we can heal, and Health Gift so in case we are low, we can sacrifice our HP and bring in a Loomian for free that is low or whatever, just so they can deal, or just so they can have as much HP as possible. You can run Bequeath Wiki Wiki sets, but I personally wouldn't recommend it, as Bequeath right now is not really the most competitive strategy. It's more of a gimmick. Now for Chartiki, Chartiki is going to be simple. You really don't want to invest as much into energy because we already have enough energy, but just in case, I put 24 energy here just so we can have 275, so we can use 5 Fire Breaths and 1 Burn Up. Speaking of Burn Up is mainly here so we can get rid of hazards. If you don't want that and replace it for another move, then I'd understand. 200 HP and 184 melee defense is so we can get 3-hit KO'd by a very brawny Himbrr with Ice Essence Ice Hammer. So you can be a pretty good Himbrr check at that. And the leftovers can go into range attack, but if you have some other specifics that you do want to go into, like range defense or a possible Zuelong, then go do that. Your ability will be Noxious Weeds here, so we can absorb plant types. We don't really have, or like, it's not really necessary here because we already 4 times resist, but an immunity is an immunity. And the item of choice here will be a Shade Pearl, so we can survive hits from Vesperatus and Ursouls, and we can hit them back with Muck Blast or Fire Breath. Specifically, is mainly going to be utilizing our bulk. I've seen speed Waka-Lakas, which I don't really know what to think of those because it doesn't really still outspeed a lot. So if you do want to run speed on Waka-Laka, like 200 or something, then you can sub the HP for that. Other than that, there's not really much to say here. For its energy, I am pretty sure its energy with the energy orb will let us use 8 of our movesets, I'm pretty sure. And our personality will be sluggish, frail, or not. Actually, I don't think. Hold on. Oh my gosh. It was going to be sluggish, smart. We just want to do as much damage as possible. You don't need to run sluggish. You can run sluggish or frail instead. But if you do have a pure smart Waka-Laka, then that does work as well. Energy orb, we do have a low energy stat, and while we do have expertise, our enchanted coat in my opinion is a little bit more better here, as this will help Waka-Laka's longevity. Now for this Shawchi set, this is going to be maximizing our damage output as much as possible. Our personality here will be a very smart, frail tender. We want to decrease our tender stats so we can, of course, keep our better defense stat, range defense stat more higher. But if you do want to run foolish, that is an option. Sharp focus will make it so Foul Chant is 100% accurate at all times, and its Mystic Wand item will be able to increase our range attack stat a lot more. 200 range attack and speed is of course to max it out. 52 HP are the leftovers. On second thought, you don't really need the energy here. I would just put the 4 energy rule into the energy just so we don't waste anything in our energy stat, and 96 HP just for our leftovers. Our energy stat will let us use 5 foul chants anyway, so it's not the most big of the deal here. If you want to run Elemental Burst on Shawchi instead of Peace of Mind, because Shawchi is frail enough to the point where you'd rather do as much damage as you can, I'd do that. But just in case, I would rather use Peace of Mind just so we can possibly set up on some Loomian'S that aren't suspecting the Peace of Mind. Not to mention that Peace of Mind can also be pretty good for predicting swaps, because in case if the opponent goes into a range attacking Loomian, we can have a better matchup with it because we do have +1 on range attack and range defense at that point. So Ventacean here doesn't really have the best niche, but the only niche it really does have is our battering ram, so we're going to make use of that with this set. Ventacean is going to be running 200 HP and 200 melee defense, so we can max out our defenses as much as possible, and the 56 energy here will be able to let us use 2 geysers, 1 battering ram, 2 braces, and 1 soft water. Soft water did get buffed here, so this is pretty good for any Ventacean main, and of course brace to set up that battering ram, geyser to cripple melee attacking Loomians. Our ability of Sharp Edges is so we can cripple the melee attacking Loomians that use contact moves on us. Personality, very robust, max out our defenses, and our item of choice will be the heavy armor because we can do more with battering ram. We can now scale that more, which is very good. And we can of course increase our defenses and the amount of hits we can take on the melee side. Alright, now on to Ursoul. Ursoul is a really good Loomian, I think everyone knows that. However, Ursoul is going to be using a bit different of the set compared to its chase down variant, mainly because sharpened Ursouls are now really good. As for its moveset, it's really ultimately up to your choice at this point. Almost all of its moves that it would normally have, other than maybe chase down, is viable. If you want to sub in one of the priority stat moves for a pep jab or a shadow sprint or a phantom slash, go right ahead. But for every Ursoul as of these days, slapdown and sharpen will be your main 2 moves. Sharpen is so we can set up on the walls that we can set up on and we can deal massive damage. This will also help us in the late game because we can potentially sweep with Ursoul with our priority moves, so do note that. Slapdown is obviously here to take off items of the opposing team, so this is always going to be a good thing. And in my own personal opinion, I would rather run Pep Jab over Quick Punch because in my opinion, there are a little bit more things I would want to hit with Shadow Sprint than I would like to hit with Quick Punch. For example, I would like to get the jumps on Nevermares, which is always a pretty good thing to have in my teams. So just know that these moves can be switched in and out. So for the energy of 8, this will let me get up to 249 energy, where I can use 2 slapdowns, well 3 slapdowns actually, 1 sharpen, and the rest can be the shadow sprints and the pep jabs. So this is pretty good for Ursoul right here. 200 HP and melee attack are of course to max those stats out, and you do have 92 TPs left. I couldn't dump it all into melee defense, so you do have 92 HP left to work with. It is pretty versatile in what you can do. You can put it into speed, so you can outspeed some defensive Loomians if you really want to, but in my opinion, just dump them into a stats, or if you do find something where you can survive a hit, for example, then I would take that investment. Now onto Ursnac. Ursnac is going to be a similar case with Ursoul, although you don't really need anything in its energy stat to actually make it work. I do think Ursnac in this metagame is a little bit more better than the previous metagame with the clever Ursnac, mainly because Ursnac right now can switch in onto Halvantix if it has to. You can swap in on Bar Badgers. It is pretty versatile in what it can switch in on. However, do note that unlike Icicle, its main Baffle counterpart, you don't have recovery, so Health Amulet is essential. Tank will let us get in the battle much easier. What I would try to do with Ursnac is double switch it in so you can have that tank ability still active, so you can actually do really well and just take less damage overall and swap in your wall breaker, which is also good. 96 range defense is leftovers since we're going to be investing in HP and melee defense. Heartbreak is so we can get a potential daze. Slapdown is to get rid of items. Baffle is of course to baffle out, mainly to support wall breakers and other offensive Loomians. And Shadow Sprint is to chip down Loomian's that are pretty low, so we can potentially revenge kill them with Ursnac or something on our team. You can replace other moves, like for example, I guess you can run Phantom Slash for some reason, but Shadow Sprint is more consistent. While it is niche, so is Phantom Slash because you're not going to be doing a lot of damage. Just note that Shadow Sprint, you won't be clicking a bunch of the time, so make sure you click Shadow Sprint when you are positive you are going to kill the thing right in front of you. Now, onto Revenine. Revenine is also another spirit type where it doesn't really need a lot of investment in its energy stat. You only need 12, so you can use 5 Fire Breaths. We're running Final Rouse on here. I do not know if it has another good 4th move slot. I wouldn't want to run a mixed Revenine with Shadow Sprint, but that is an option. This set will be utilizing Very Nimble and with Vengeance. It does say Cleaner at the top, but specifically, Revenine is going to be a revenge killer. You do have enough damage with Vengeance, so you can run Very Nimble, but if you don't want to do that, Smart Nimble is also fine. Max out your range attack and speed stats, get the 86 left over in the HP, or I think in this case it's 88, right? Yeah, 88 in this case. Fire Essence will be your main item because while you could run Spirit Essence, it's not really that worth it. Light types can absorb you. And do note one more thing, Ghostly Howl here so we can bypass dodges and scapegoats. This can come in handy if a Tyrex is trying to stall our energy out, but if you don't think you'll ever run into that situation, then just use Spectral Burst. Now, onto Eruptodon. Eruptodon is mainly going to be focused on doing as much damage as possible. You would want to get Eruptodon in pretty safely by double switching or by baffling it in or flash and fleeing it in. Just have some pivots on you or just double switch a lot with Eruptodon because its defenses are not really that great. Your personality will be very smart because you want to do as much damage as possible. You can run Nimble if Nimble Falkyries are getting more common or if you want to outspeed some other stuff. But personally, very smart, I would maximize its damage. Pyro is of course to maximize your Fire Breath and the Fire Essence just so we can stay consistent with our most damaging move. Magnify is going to be our setup move. Mudslide is mainly here as third coverage, but if it comes down to it, we can get rid of our own barbs, which is always nice. And Dark Surge is for the Luminamis of the world. You can also use this for some other light types that can swap in on you. This is always really good. And for our 36 energy here, you want to use 2 Magnifies, 2 Fire Breaths, and a choice between 2 or 1 of each of Dark Surge and Mudslides. 64 HP's leftovers and max out your range attack and speed so you can max out as your damage output and outspeed as much as possible. Now onto Now onto Krakaloa. Krakaloa is gonna be running range defense. This is gonna be a pretty big trend into some of the upcoming fire types, mainly because Krakaloa does really well against most range attackers, more specifically Ikazune and some other stuff, so that's always great. For your moveset, do notice it is utility, so all of these will be utility based. You can run Magma Burst over Raging Flame for example, but this is mainly going to be a utility wall. Raging Flame is to possibly burn the things in front of you. Mud Spatter is just extra coverage, but we can also lower the speed. Burn Up is to get rid of hazards, and Rejuvenate is of course to heal. Krakaloa already has enough energy, so you can run a heavy item on it and don't need to be worried about energy investing. So max out your stats for energy rule and then put the rest into the melee defense, because it wouldn't really matter if you put it into our range attack stat. Our ability will be combustible, so we can absorb fire type moves. This will help out our matchups against stuff like Ikazune and other range attacking stuff, so this will be pretty great. And of course the item of choice will be Heavy Shield because we already have Rejuvenate, so we don't need items like Health Amulets. And we can just boost our defenses even further. Now onto Volcaloa. Volcaloa is going to be running 200 melee attack and speed, mainly because you want to outspeed as much as possible while also being able to hit as hard as possible, and that reflects with its personality. Its personality, Brawny Nimble, is just so we can do as much damage and outspeed as much as possible. Same case for Krakaloa. Combustible is going to be our ability of choice to absorb fire type moves. This is also pretty great because Volcaloa is not the most bulkiest thing in the world, so using Combustible will help you swap into the battle very quickly. Your item of choice will be the Ancient Essence. You can run the Fire Essence so you can boost up your Blaze Punch, but Savage Greed is your most damaging move, and so I would click Savage Greed more than Blaze Punch. Blaze Punch, Savage Greed, Brawn Boost, and Earthquake will be your main 3 moves. Savage Greed are for opposing Ancient types and Spirit types that would like to swap in on you. Earthquake is mainly for the... well, Earthquake's not really needed here because Fire Punch does hit Metal types, but Earthquake is just good coverage overall. It's also pretty a safe move to click, and it does work well with our other moves as well. And Blaze Punch is stab. We aren't running Coconut Bomb on here because, well, we don't really need to worry about Earth types, but if your team is specifically weak to Earth types, then I guess I would run Coconut Bomb if you would really want to. And for the energy TPs, we are running 80 because we can use 5 Savage Greeds and we can fit in a Brawn Boost in there as well, so that's pretty great. Actually, no, not 5 Savage Greeds, 4 Savage Greeds to be exact, and then the rest will be 1 Earthquake, which is pretty good, and you can of course sub in that Earthquake for 2 Brawn Boosts, which is always nice. Of course, because Volcaloa is a sweeper, you would rather use it in the late to end game of the battle where things are weakened, so Volcaloa's chance of dying is a lot less weaker and a lot less to be scared about, so that's all it for Volcaloa. Now, on to Festifer. Festifer is honestly not really the greatest, mainly because its defensive typing is so bad. And while it does hit decently hard with its Raging Tackle, Stab with Chill, and Timber Thrash, it doesn't really have a place in this metagame, but I wouldn't count it out, at the very least. Its moveset of choice will be Raging Tackle, Earthquake, Timber Thrash, and Icicle Trap. These are all moves that work pretty well together. These are pretty good stab moves. These are Festifer's strongest attacking moves. And while we don't have a 4th attacking move to complete it, Icicle Trap is already decent utility anyway, and you can make use of your defenses to set up hazards for your team, which is always nice. Short in HP and 2 in melee attack is of course to maximize the stats you really want to use. I wouldn't put the 200 HP into anywhere else because you'd be tanking hits from both sides anyway, and you're pretty bulky enough already, and your speed stat is too low to make any use of it. And same thing goes with your energy and melee defense. For energy, just to get up to 250 energy, so we can spam Earthquakes and a mixture of Timber Thrashes and Raging Tackles. And for your melee defense, I would just rather put it here because it is your lower defense stat, and while it doesn't make up for your range defense, like it's not on par of it, it's still a pretty decent stat to have. Now onto Obsidian. Obsidian is going to be running a non-sluggish Drudge. This will make it so you can be as fast as possible. I'm pretty sure with the 56 speed TPs and a +1, you do outspeed a nimble Zuelong or around that speed tier, so that is pretty great for you. 200 HP and 200 melee defense, these are gonna max out your defenses, make you as tanky as possible on the melee side so you can tank melee hits, and you can of course get that epic body crash scaling. For energy, because we don't really need energy on this Loomian because we already have enough, and the 40 range defense are just leftovers. Primal Slash and Body Crash are going to be your main 2 moves. Primal Slash is mainly so we don't get walled by spirit types like Nevermare and Harvesect and Vesperatu, so we'd want to run this. If you are struggling with Luminami, I would replace Drudge for Mega Chomp or something like that, but Luminami, not really a thing to be worried about, and light types in general, honestly. So that's really what I wouldn't do. Drudge is so we can set up our damage and we can potentially sweep the late game. While Obsidian isn't the boss rate it once was, it's still a pretty good Loomian that could take advantage of the tide of the battle and of course put it in your favor. Beast Slumber and Mysterious Dust go really well hand in hand, so you can get increased defenses, so even if you do heal and the opponent attacks, it won't be nearly as much damage, and he could potentially wake up the next turn, which is always nice. It also does prevent you from using heavy items, and while you do have the energy, you don't have an energy problem, I would much rather have Mysterious Dust because you can use much more moves opposed to a heavy item and then having those moves energy scale higher. Now onto Trumbull here. Trumbull is mainly going to be running 136 speed. This is so we can outspeed very smart Falkyries with the nimble personality, and the 116 HP are just leftovers, and with the 48 energy, this will let you use 1 Body Slam, 2 Battle Horns if you really want to, and a mixture of Rogue Assaults and Mega Chomps. This is pretty much the Trumbull set you'd want to run. Trumbull is not the fastest thing in the world, but because you do have Nimble, it will let you outspeed pretty much all the walls in the game, so that's pretty good. Your ability of choice will be Brute Force, and while I'm pretty sure it only does scale Rogue Assault and Mega Chomp, it's still a good ability to have, and your item of choice will be Health Amulet. So Trumbull right now, it's not really the best in this metagame, mainly because it can't really find a niche when other Loomians are just better than what it can do right now, but overall Trumbull does seem to be pretty solid down in the lower tiers, which is why I am making this set. Now onto Mewtwo. Mewtwo is going to be a similar case to Trumbull because it would want to run as much damage and speed as possible because of Mewtwo's speed tier. Now personally, 60 energy is so we can use 1 Raging Tackle and 1 Stretch, and then a mixture of Resonates and Peace of Minds. This is a sweeping set, so I would use Mewtwo in late to the end of the battle, so you can make sure that you can outspeed most of the things and one-shot them. But this also does work as a pretty nice wall breaker. Personally, if you do want to run Gamma Pulse, then I would do it over Resonate because you already do have Raging Tackle, or Raging Howl in this case, scaling off of Tone Death, I'm pretty sure, so you don't need to do that. And your ability is of course Tone Deaf, so you can scale my sound type moves, and your item of choice will be Typeless Essence to increase your Raging Howl even further. Now onto Gabademic. Gabademic will want to run as much range attack and speed. While you can make the argument of making Gabademic bulky by putting 200 into the HP, do note that Gabademic isn't supposed to be in the battle for long. It's just supposed to set up hazards and then leave. That's all it needs to do. As for its energy stat, this will let you use 3 layer of barbs and then a mixture of your other moves, so just make sure you do run that. Your ability of choice will be Immunized. This is mainly so you can stop getting status, and just so you don't get RNG'd by burned attacks or poison attacks, because there are probably not enough times where I can say that a Loomian Fire Breath my Gabademic and it brought me down to 1 HP, and now I am burnt, and then it broke the clutch plushie. So yeah, Immunize is pretty good on here. If you want to use Baneful, I wouldn't really, because this is just a hazard setting thing, so I wouldn't really worry about that. And your personality will be very nimble here. This will make it so you can outspeed as much as possible. While some boot Loomians can outspeed you, there's really not much that can outspeed you when you're already this fast. So you're mostly going to be getting hazards up all the time unless some priority user is in front of you or some regift user is in front of you. Now, I did forget to mention one thing for Gabademic, hazard removal, but now on to Pharoglyph. I'm going to be showcasing the Temper one and then the Idiosyncratic one. In my opinion, the Pharoglyph right here is much more better than the Idiosyncratic. While there are arguments of mixed Pharoglyph, I don't really see the point because your opposing stat is 50, so I wouldn't really see how that scaling will work, but who knows. It might be good later on. It's going to be following the same energy rule because it doesn't really need the energy in the end of the day. 96 HP are leftovers and 200 rage attack and speed, so we can max out our attack and speed. and our personality will be nimble. While you can run smart, there are a lot of competitiveness in the speed tier, so you'd want to run nimble here just so you can outspeed most of the Loomians in your speed tier, which is pretty important to a sweeper. Now, for the item, Health Amulet is really great here because there are the arguments of Pharoglyph dipping below 50%, then Health Amuletating it up, so you can potentially get 2 temper boosts. But in reality, this is pretty good for most sweepers as this gives Pharoglyph enough longevity to set up and potentially sweep the rest of the team. Now, for your moveset, Shoot Blast will mainly be here for Spirit types and Vesperatus, and Psycho Blast is your main stab, and Dark Surge is mainly here for Light types and Plant types. You can run other moves like Boulder Blast if you're worried about metal types and other stuff like that, so do note that you're not limited to these 3 moves, and Peace of Mind is a must on most Pharoglyphs, so you can potentially sweep the end game. Now, onto Idiosyncratic. Idiosyncratic is going to be a bit different here. It's still going to want Health Amulets. You can run Talent Trade on a Idiosyncratic Pharoglyph, and then it will become ranged again, but Talent Trade is banned in most tournaments because, as far as I know, there's no way to stop it reliably, so I wouldn't want to run Talent Trade on this. So the 48 energy is to use 1 Cerebral Slash and then a mixture of the Rogue Assault, Outburst, and Bulk Ups. Now, I'm pretty sure there is an alternative to Outburst. I'm pretty sure Pharoglyph has Phantom Slash and Primal Slash. So if you don't want to run Outburst, and because you are a sweeper, by the end of the match you're probably going to run out of energy before you can finish the job, it would make sense to swap out Outburst. Bulk Up here is going to be pretty great because you are a sweeper, so you'd rather take as much time as you can to set up. Rogue Assault is also going to be here because it is one of the stronger moves in this one, and Cerebral Slash is our stab move. While it doesn't do too much compared to Rogue Assault, it is still a decent move to have, and if you do want Phantom Slash on your Pharoglyph, then Cerebral Slash is also, you can replace it for Cerebral Slash. Now onto Icicle. Icicle is going to be running 200 HP and 200, not 200 melee defense, but 200 range defense. Specifically, Icicle is pretty good in this metagame as it can check Deldrix and Gargolem attack really well. It is one of the only Lumians that can do that, and for that reason Icicle is pretty great. Not to mention Icicle can be served as a pretty good cleaner, but a pretty good baffle user to bring in your wall breakers. And while it isn't as good as Ursnac because it doesn't have tank, it does have rejuvenate, so it does have that over Ursnac because it can survive more. This will mainly be used as an expertise and energy orb, so it can spam as much baffles and fadeaways as possible. You can use something over expertise because I'm pretty sure expertise already lowers the energy enough. You can, for example, put some barter sets on this Icicle. You could put some some pearls if you are struggling with some specific types on your team. Icicle is pretty versatile with its item slots, so I'm just putting energy orb and expertise for the fun of it. If you do so, Rejuvenate and Ice Hammer will be your main 2 moves on here, and Baffle and Fadeaway for the double pivot is always nice. I'm pretty sure Baffle does get cancelled out by Regift. I'm pretty sure it's some ability, so Baffle's not going to work all the time, which is why you should run Fadeaway as well. Fadeaway can also be pretty great. While it isn't effective in bringing your wall breakers in safely as Baffle because it doesn't lower the speed, Fadeaway it does do the job, and it also is of course stab. Now onto Garbantis here. Garbantis is going to be a robust, nimble one. I'm pretty sure a very nimble might be better in this metagame, but this is a base template in your personalities you can run. I wouldn't recommend very robust, mainly because you still want speed, because like I said, the speed tier that Garbantis is in, and it's similar to Pharoglyph, it is very competitive, so running nimble or very nimble is probably the better way to go here. For your energy, 40 TPs into that will let you use 1 poison and a mixture of body crashes, burrows, and battering rams. Garbantis does do pretty well with this moveset because these are mostly low costing moves, which helps out its mediocre energy stat. And for our ability, Trash Armor is going to be here, and we're not going to be running Heavy Armor on here, mainly because we simply do not have enough energy to sustain ourselves consistently, so we're going to be running Bug Essence. You can run Brawler Essence here, but I'm just boosting the Stab move that we have, mainly because it is Stab, and while it does cost higher energy, it does do more damage. Now onto Stratosaur. Stratosaur is going to be running a very clever Magnify set. This is mainly so we can help check or at least help defend against some of the range attacking Loomians such as Dragoon and some Gargolem sets and some Dragoon sets. Not all, but some. This will help us defend against those dangerous Loomians, and which is pretty important. The 64 energy for Stratosaur here will let us use 2 Magnifies, 1 Metal Blast, 1 Jetstream, and 1 Perch. Your personality here will be very clever, so we can maximize our defense and of course maximize our chances from tanking hits from those Loomians, and our 36 melee defense are leftovers. You're going to be wanting to run Toxic Filter here because it is the best defensive ability that Stratosaur has, of course, and great immunities are always great. And for the Heavy Shield, we do have enough energy to use this. However, if you want to use other items such as pearls, if a Heavy Shield is already being used, then go right on ahead. Next, we are looking at Diborg. Diborg doesn't really have a great niche, mainly because it doesn't really have the best, it has a lot of competition basically, and it doesn't have recovery, so it can't compete as a wall with other walls, and its defensive typing really isn't the best because being 4 times weak to earth is not the best, being weak to fire and not without a lot of upsides is why its defensive typing is mainly bad. For right now, you'd really want to run a ranged Diborg set. I wouldn't see I can't see the possibilities of running a mixed Diborg, mainly because stuff are already too bulky anyway, and the stuff you can't take advantage of, you already do have your teammates for that, so there's really no point in my opinion. So I would just run Muck and Metal Blast so we can maximize our damage output on our range attack side. While our melee attack side is still higher, we do have stronger stabs on the ranged attack side, so that's why I go range here. Poison is so we can cripple Loomians, and Provoke is so we can stop Loomians from setting up. And with the energy TPs 250, 5 Muck Blasts or 4 Muck Blasts and 2 Poison or Provokes, it's really simple with this set. Now onto Tyrex. Tyrex is going to be wanting to run a Brawny Clever set. Brawny Nimble ones are okay, but specifically Tyrex does thrive to be a pretty good Loomian when it does have the ability to take advantage of its defensive utility. 12 energy is for 250 energy. This is so we can use 5 Steel Crushers or 4 Steel Crushers and 2 Power Focuses. Same goes with Earthquakes because they do cost the same energy as Steel Crushers. And 200 melee attack is to max that stat out. And because we are clever, we put the rest of the 88 ranged events into the ranged events. And its personality will be Brawny Clever. This is so we can at least have some offensive utility, so we can make use of our power focuses even more, and Clever so we can help against mine types, which is always really nice, and air types as well. And for our ability, it's going to be Terrifying, mainly because we can swap in on melee attackers, which is always a good niche to have, and our item of choice will also be Health Amulets, mainly because we do not have any form of recovery, and it does work well with Scapegoat here because we can Scapegoat up, gain HP as we passively set up power focuses to deal damage the next turn. Now, onto Munchwheel. I don't really know how to make a Munchwheel set, mainly because whatever niche I try to give it, there's already a better Loomian for that job. More specifically, if you try to run a specialization, Metatoad already kind of does that even better, even though I don't like the power of, or at least the concept of specialization in of itself. And so that's why we're going Rev Up here. We're going to be taking advantage, or somewhat taking advantage of our defenses. With very brawny Munchwheel, you want to swap in on as much melee attackers as possible, or at least melee attackers that don't threaten you, so you can actually take advantage of your defense stat. And using this knowledge, we want to set up with Bulk Up and Rev Up. We can use the item of choice here, such as Health Amulet. This will help us keep our longevity up, so we can safely set up bulk ups even more. Steel Crusher, Mega Chomp, and Thunder Stomp are gonna be our main stuff here, because it is our best stabs and best moves to have. Blaze Chomp isn't being ran on this because Mega Chomp already hits plant types and Thunder Chomp already hits metal types, so it's not really the best to run Blaze Chomp. Although I guess you could run Blaze Chomp for specific scenarios, like for specific dual typing Loomians, but overall this moveset does seem to be the best one. Now, I did debate of putting a Clutch Accelerate Guard Drone here, mainly because I'm not really sure of its viability, but Guard Drone isn't a viable Loomian. It might as well make use of its gimmick instead of trying to be an actual competitive Loomian, because it's outclassed by many Loomians at that point. So on to Clutch Accelerate. You're going to be wanting to run your ability Clutch so you can survive any hit that's coming at you, and use your Rageful plushie, so in case it's a super effective hit, you now get +2 on range attack and melee attack. And now you can set up Accelerate on that same turn, so you have +2 speed and outspeed most Loomians in the game. Do note that boots users around the 90 tier speed tier and above can still outspeed you, but for the most part, there are not a lot of Loomians who can outspeed you when you are up at +2. Smart Nimble is to balance out our stats. You can probably get away with running very smart, but because you do have the Accelerate niche, you have to make use of this, so running Nimble is of course pretty great. And you can't run very Nimble here as well, because while your range attack stat is 132, it's not that high when you don't have Smart on it. Your moveset of choice is Fire Breath, Frost Beam, and Thunder Strike. The reason why Metal Blast isn't here is because these three moves in combination with together does hit more types than what Metal Blast can offer. Now onto Himbrr. Himbrr is pretty simple here. 52 energy is to get up to 250 energy. You want to run the Power Cuffs on Himbrr because it does have the energy to abuse that, and because our moves are so low costing because they are chomp moves, this will work really well with the Power Cuffs. The personality will be Brawny Nimble. You can run very Nimble if you want to, so you can outspeed potential Zuelongs if they're running Nimble and not very Nimble. But usually this is the base personality. Depending on what your team will need, you can of course change it to whatever you want. I wouldn't suggest very Brawny because at that point, a lot of the boots users can now outspeed you. So running Nimble or very Nimble is what I would suggest. Now on to Arapago. Arapago is going to be a simple Loomian to build here. We want to run the Energy Orb here because while we do kind of need some damage, because 99 range attack with a Magnify is not nearly enough to actually sweep most teams. But with the Energy Orb here, we have the ability to run 5 Tsunamis and 1 Magnify before we need to wait or rest with the 64 TPs. Arapago particularly isn't the greatest Loomian to use right now, specifically because it doesn't have a great niche. Most sweepers such as Nevermare and Waka-Laka do much more of a better job because their coverage is kind of more threatening and they do more damage in this metagame. But Arapago does feel a decent niche as a sweeper on your team. I just wouldn't recommend using it. Your ability of choice will be Quick Recovery because your other abilities don't really work well with what you do have. So with quick recovery, you can absorb statuses from other Loomians. And of course, you can absorb that, switch over, and then you can bring in a Loomian that couldn't get status. So that's pretty great. Now, onto our Skellig set. Thank God Skellig got Wave Wrecker, because now with this, Skellig has a complete moveset that actually looks very solid. Speaking of that moveset, Drudge, Wave Wrecker, Mega Chomp, and Primal Slash will be our main 4 moves that you want to run on most sweeping Skellig sets. Drudge is so we can boost our speed and melee attack, and we can make Skellig even faster and even stronger, so it's hard to catch up on it in the late game. Wave Wrecker is our strongest stab move. Mega Chomp is for light types and plant types that would love to switch in on us, and Primal Slash is to catch the spirit types and ancient types on the swap, and of course because we are a spirit type ourselves. With the energy stat of 56, this will let us use 2 Drudges, 1 Wave Wrecker, 1 Mega Chomp, and 2 Primal Slashes. And our nimble personality is to outspeed as much as possible after a Drudge. We don't really want Brawny here because we're already going to be drudging up with our boosts, and we're going to be hitting hard enough anyway. And because Skellig is a sweeper, we're going to be using this late to the end of the battle where most things are weakened. So having that damage does seem like a waste to have, and you'd rather take the nimble because they might have a revenge killer on their side that they can take advantage of, and they can outspeed us and kill the Skellig sweep. Now for combative and the item of Power Cuffs. Power Cuffs already works well with Skellig, and like I said, and like you can see, these moves already scale with the Power Cuffs. You can run shells or essences if you really want to, but I would take use of Skellig's energy stats. And combative is our most offensive ability. You can run Better Touch at its other abilities, but I would rather take the possibility of the chance of a possible Eerie Stare, Terrifying, or other moves like it, so we can swap in for free and gain a plus or +2 in our melee attack stat. The bulk up moveset, and in my opinion, Joltooth bulk up is probably better than the Boots variant of Joltooth or other variants such as the Bane of Haste one. If you want to use Bane of Haste, then go ahead, but bulk up seems a lot better on Joltooth because, in my opinion at least, there is a better Loomian out there that does the Boots job better than Joltooth, and that Loomian is called Halvantic. Because Halvantic does have poison, it can cripple walls with Boots, so it doesn't need to be worried about a wall getting in for free because they're never always free with the poison in mind. So compared to Halvantic, Joltooth doesn't really have that, and with bulk up, it will allow us to take advantage of our defenses and our defensive typing. Bulk up's obviously going to be the main core of this moveset, and our other 3 moves will be Clay Slap, Thunderclap, and Primal Slash. Thunderclap and Primal Slash are obviously our 2 main stab moves, and Clay Slap does help with Tyrex a bit, but we're going to need to set up a little bit before Tyrex actually fears us. Our personality will be Brawny here, mainly so we can do as much damage as possible, and our speed of 104 will let us outspeed a non-sluggish Stratosaur, which is always nice because we can take advantage of that and hit it super effectively. However, if you don't want to do this, then you can dump the rest into the HP and into one of the either defenses. The energy will be 12, and this 12 energy will let us get up to 250 energy. It's pretty comfy spot for us anyway, so that's always a pretty good idea to do that. Now we are on to Infernix, and as you can tell from the set name, this is going to be a UU variant of Infernix because frankly, Infernix in my opinion thrives the best down there. While Infernix does thrive in stall teams in OU, it does have a really solid place in UU where it's pretty versatile in what teams it can go on. So anyways, Infernix will be running a ranged clever set just like the old Infernix used to run, mainly because it does have a lot of great matchups against range attackers down there, and it can provide its best utility with being a ranged wall. So running 200 HP and range fence is what you want to do with this set, and 48 energy lets you use 3 Fire Breaths and 3 Burn Ups. Your energy stat is pretty important here because we are running Phoenix Flame, because we don't want to sacrifice ourselves with Phoenix Flame. So it's pretty important that we have it here. And our melee defense of 48, we can't really put 52, so if you find some other way of evening it out and across the other stats, then go right on ahead. The item of choice will be the Heavy Shield because we do have enough energy to use said Heavy Shield, and our personality is clever to tank as much range hits as possible. To go along with this, we have Power Napper, which will increase our longevity without using Phoenix Flame 24/7. And for our moveset, Fire Breath, Phoenix Flame, Burn Up, and Shrewd Blast will be our main choice of moves. If you do not have hazard removal, then I suggest using Burn Up, but if you do have it, then I would suggest running Peace of Mind or maybe even Jetstream. However, Jetstream is pretty niche down in UU, so I'd rather use the 2 stabs, and that I'll go along with that. Now onto Dorogo. It is debated that Dorogo is not really much of use anymore because Dragoon is now in play. However, they do have not similar but separate roles on a team, and Dorogo's as a cleaner or sweeper is still really solid. So with Dorogo here, Dorogo is pretty good as you do have a pretty good energy stat to take advantage of. 76 energy will get you up to 250 energy. This will let you use 2 Draco Beams, 2 Dark Surges, and I'm pretty sure 1 Baffle. And your HP stat, it's pretty low, but you're not going to be worrying about this too much. Just put the remaining into 24. And because we do have our maxed out range attack and speed, we should be outspeeding a lot of non-boot Loomians, and we're going to be doing a lot with Draco Beam because of our anomaly ability. Our item of choice will be Ancient Essence, so we can scale our Draco Beam even more. If you can run other items, like if you can't run an Ancient Essence for whatever reason, then running a Dark Essence or Health Amulet should be fine under Dorogo. Now, onto a moveset. Draco Beam and Dark Surge will be your main 2 moves as they are your stabs. And Baffle is pretty good here because you can lead off battles and predict swap-ins, so for example, if an offensive Loomian tries to come in on you that can take advantage of you, you can baffle out, and now you can bring in an offensive Loomian of your own that can apply pressure on that Loomian, and because they outspeed, you'll most likely win that 1v1, causing pressure on the opponent. It's really good. And Mud Spatter is here. Mud Spatter is not really that worth it, honestly. It's just an extra coverage move. If you don't want to run Mud Spatter, then Provoke is a lot more of a better option because Wobblisk, your main swap in, you can prevent that from setting up hazards on you because it walls you, so that's also really great. If you don't want to run that, you can also run Barbs, but Barbs Dorogo is not really the best because it would rather much be a second option to Gobdemic or Gargulum Speed if you're running a hyper offense team with Dorogo, so don't really run Barbs if it's not the main, run Barbs if it's not the main setter. So yeah, it's pretty versatile of a moveset, so you shouldn't really worry about this too much. Now onto Maomerc. Ignore the typo of ranged offensive, it's obviously ranged defensive, and this will be a classic Maomerc set where instead of running Heavy Shield like most Maomercs do, I'm going to be running Energy Orb, mainly because Maomerc has a low energy stat and we can use much more moves without it. So we're going to be running very clever here. This is pretty good in UU. I wouldn't suggest using this in OU at all, but this can help the Protagons and the Falkyries of the metagame, which is always nice. And your ability will be Woodsman, mainly because it's our only really defensive ability and will give us immunities to plant types because we are neutral to them. And our item of choice will be the Energy Orb, like I said, to use as much moves as possible. And our energy stat of 236 will let us use 3 photosynthesis, 2 photosynthesis, 3 driving forces, and choice of Gnarly Gash or Wave Wrecker. Now, speaking of our moveset, Gnarly Gash is mainly here so we can stop opposing plant types from switching in because, as you can tell, our stabs are resisted by those plant types, and Wave Wrecker here is our strongest stab move. If you want to run some other alternatives like Aqua Jaws, you can do that because can rack up damage over time. But because you are running Driving Force, it kind of messes with Aquajaws's viability because you're going to be clicking Driving Force almost all the time. So there's really no point in clicking Aquajaws if you're just going to be getting that Loomian out of the battle. Now onto Meditoad. Meditoad is going to be running a pretty simple set because Meditoad has set up with Peace of Mind and it actually has good stabs on its range attack side. We're going to be using a range attack Meditoad. This is going to be focused more on wall breaking, but if you want to run a more utility based Meditoad with Tase and Slapdown and all of those stuff, then I would suggest putting that 200 range attack into 200 melee attack, and then the set is pretty much the same. Personality, very smart. We want to hit as much as possible and proc that sluggish for our Watcher ability. And our 200 HP and 200 range attack, pretty simple. 36 energy will get up to 250 energy. This is so we can use 2 Peace of Minds and a mixture of Thunder Strikes and Psycho Blasts. As for the rest of our TPs, 40 and 24 aren't anything for anything, they're just to even out our defenses. And our item of choice will be the Volt Shell. I wouldn't expect you guys to have a Health Amulet for Meditoad because it's probably on another Loomian. But if you do have the choice to run a Health Amulet, then I would suggest it on Meditoad because it would greatly appreciate the recovery. Thunderstrike and Psycho Blast are our strongest stabs, and Peace of Mind and Hypnotize. Peace of Mind is mainly here so we can set up, and Hypnotize is more of a lack of a 4th move slot. If you have ideas for 4th move slots and you just want to run something else other than Hypnotize, then you can do so. So for Blowtox here, it's going to be a UU defensive set, mainly because if you're trying to use Blowtox in OU, there's really no point in using it because Barblast is much of a better wall than Blowtox is in OU, at least in my opinion. So we're going to be using it in a place where it thrives very well, and that is in UU. And it's going to be playing a similar role to Blowtox in UU, where it's going to be spreading spreading poisons around and being melee focused on the defense side. And this is pretty good for walling stuff like Wendelin down there, which is a pretty big threat as of right now, which is always good. So for our energy TPs, 28 TPs will allow us to use 1 Venom Chomp, 2 Poisons, 2 Aquajaws, and 2 Rejuvenates. I might mixed up, so it's like 1 Aquajaw and 3 Poisons, but it is in that move order. You can change it around, but that's what the TPs of the energy are for. And for our item of choice, it's going to be the Energy Orb. You can run either items like the Heavy Shield or the Heavy Armor, but in my own opinion, Blowtox doesn't really fit that role because its energy is kind of low on the spectrum of where you can use heavy items, so I wouldn't really recommend that. However, if you do find some success, then of course keep using it. Your ability of choice will be the Sharp Edges, and this will help us chip down melee walls, or melee attackers in this case, and because we don't really hit too hard without some setup, Sharp Edges will definitely help in chipping down those melee attackers. And as for our moveset, Aquajaws, Rejuvenate, Poison, Venom Chomp. Aquajaws is here so we can rack up as much damage as possible, and Poison is here so we can cripple melee attacking Loomians and pretty much any Loomian that we can find that isn't a poison type, so that's always nice. Rejuvenate for recovery, and for Venom Chomp is a really niche option. It only really helps against Loomians like Maomurk, plant types, etc. However, if you do not want Venom Chomp, you can run either items like the Icicle Traps, which can be pretty good in most situations because hazards in general is just always great to have. Now onto Barblast. Barblast is also a very simple set. It's gonna be the OU set. Barblast doesn't really have a lot of great teams it can fit on. It mostly thrives on more bulkier sides of teams. However, it doesn't mean it can find success in other teams. I just wouldn't really recommend this for hyper offense type teams at all. So for your energy stat, it's just to get up to 250, just plain standard stuff. And unlike Blowtox, it can try to run the heavy armor. However, if you do not want to run it, you can of course run the energy orb like Blowtox. Your personality will be sluggish, frail, very robust. This is so you don't decrease your attacks from, running clumsy like Blowtox, and very robust, make yourself as tanky as possible. Barblast is a pretty solid check to most things like Barbadger, Kanibo. You can also swap in on Halventix for a few times. I don't really recommend it, but it can do that if you're stuck to that situation. Your ability here will be high explosive because we don't really have any dedicated defensive abilities that would actually be pretty great, so we might as well boost our damage even further. And that's the great thing about Barblast, because with high explosives, this makes Water Bomb and Toxablast a lot more potent, which is always very nice to see. And for the rest, we are running Rejuvenate and Power Focus. Power Focus is so we can increase our damage even more. However, if you want to use a more utility-based Barblast, you can replace Power Focus for Icicle Traps or Poison if you do want that role. However, you do have to worry about some other stuff that could set up on you and potentially kill you without Power Focus, so there is that caution to that decision. Next, we're going to be talking about Garlash, and in my own personal opinion, Garlash is pretty great because Barter Boots is always very good for crippling down walls. It's not really, in my opinion, it's not really the best in OU right now, but it does have Barter Boots to cripple walls, specifically walls like Obsidian, Barblast, Harvesect. They're all really good Lumi to take advantage of Barter Boots, and because you do have a decent speed tier, this does let you pull off boots very well. So, along with our TPs, 12 energies to get up to 250 energy. This is just pretty simple stuff here, and 88 HP are the leftovers. 200 melee attack and speed are of course to max out our stats, and our personality will be very brawny. If you want to run brawny nimble so you can pull off boots more, then I would suggest that. And if you just want to outspeed more stuff anyway, that would also be pretty great. There are Loomians in your speed tier like Ikazune who can run boots and nimble that can outspeed you, so getting the jump on that will always be pretty nice, and you wouldn't really need to rely on barter for that. Aqua Jaws, Mega Chomp, and Venom Chomp will be your 3 remaining moves. If you do want to run Vicious Snap over Aqua Jaws, that's fine. And if you prefer one of the other Chomp moves other than Venom Chomp, I'm pretty sure it has more, then you'd much rather run that. Venom Chomp is mainly just for bulky water types that could switch in on us, like Luminami. But we already have Mega Chomp for that, so if you find some kind of niche for Venom Chomp, then I would use it. Or if you don't want to use it, just replace it for another move. If you don't want to run a barter set, you can consider its other moves, but personally I think barter is just the best way to go for Garlash. Now on to Deldrix. Deldrix is also going to be running a boot set, mainly because it is very easy to play Deldrix with boots. Because you can't just click Zip Zap 100% of the time. It is very good for it because you do have Douse, you do have Ferroblast, and Jetstream. It's just going to be very easy to click Zip Zap because of the opponent not knowing what you're going to click. You're just going to get free damage 100% of the time, so there's not really much reason or much ways I can tell you how to use Deldrix. 84 energy is pretty standard. This will let you use 5 of our moves right now, and 16 HP are the leftovers. 200 range attack and speed are of course the final stats you want to max out, and your personality will be frail, tender, very smart. Tender so we don't give Protogun an attack boost of course, and frail is because we're not using any melee attacks because our range set is just too strong. Our personality will be very smart, however you can run personalities such as the Smart Nimble set, so you can try and outspeed Nimble Ikazunes, but I'm pretty sure Nimble Ikazunes already have a higher speed than you, so very smart or Smart Nimble, or I'd just use those personalities. Very nimble I wouldn't recommend because you'd be sacrificing too much damage in order to actually do anything. So very smart nimble, make sure your Deldrix has the smart personality. And as for your ability, and I'm just going to say this now, Aqua Body doesn't matter too much. You're already frail enough and you already resist fire attacking moves, so there's not really no point to use Aqua Body. It's definitely not a necessity. I would just get a Shakedown Dodrix because you can make use of knowing what opponent's items they have. So this is already pretty great. I would just use Aqua Body if you're trying to min-max your team. It's not really too much of a necessity. So if you want to go Aqua Body, go for it, I guess. Its item of choice will be the Specialty Boots. This is mainly so we can make sure we go first almost every time, and we can pull off Zip Zaps pretty much every time we want to. And as for our moveset, Douse, Fair Blast, Zip Zap, and Jetstream, these are so we can max out our coverage as much as possible. And if you do not want to run Jetstream, which is totally fine because you already do have decent matchups against most of the bug types already, you can replace it for Thunderstrike so you can improve your matchups against Luminami, Barblast, Garlash, Cephalops, most of those stuff. However, if you just want to run 4 coverage moves, then that will just be fine. Now on to Colossotrops. Colossotrops is a bit of a weird Loomian for me to make, mainly because Baffle doesn't really work on this thing anymore, and it's still being used heavily, so I don't really know why it's being used, but the set that I still had for Colossotrops is still pretty decent. You can run 200 speed if you really want to, which probably that'll be the best for you, but 96 speed is still good for it, as this will let you outspeed non-sluggish, non-invested Obsidians. Of course, they'll outspeed you once they baffle, but this will also just help you outspeed those as well. You're gonna also try and outspeed sluggish Stratosaurs with this, I'm pretty sure, so you can do that too if you can. And your energy stat here will let you use 1 Brawn Boost, and the rest can be 4 Timber Thrashes. These of course can be mix and match with your other moves, so this will also be pretty good for you. Your ability of choice will be Vigorous, mainly because we want Volcanic Ash to boost our damage even further, even with Brawn Boost, so Colossotrops does get that thing already, which is always nice. And the rest will be going into an HP. And range defense, this will let it so we can have odd HP and get 5 hit KO'd by Icicle Traps, and 8 range defense. It's just the best because we don't want to get even HP and get 4 hit KO'd, so 8 range defense will just round the whole setup. And of course 200 melee attack is to max out that damage. Now for our moveset, if you struggle with metal types, which I guess is pretty common these days, you can run Earthquake over Mega Chomp. And if you don't really see a reason to be worried about Spirit or Ancient types, you can replace that with Primal Slash. Megachomp is pretty good here. It's pretty good for light types and mind types, which can try and switch in on you specifically. Well, not switch in, but revenge kill you. Specifically, Shawchis are mind types that can kill you. Pharoglyph is also a good one. So Megachomp is pretty useful here, but ultimately it ends up to what your team is weak to and what you want to prepare for. And now onto Hoganash. I'm pretty sure the first of the Sweet Retreat Loomian'S. And for our energy stat, we're gonna be running 64 energy with the Heavy Shield. This will let us use 1 Bulk Up, 2 Rejuvenates, and 1 Fiery Fondant. Hoganash does have not a lot of in my opinion, not a lot of energy to abuse the Heavy Shield, so if you want to run Mysterious Dust, I wouldn't really recommend that. If you want to run Pearls or possibly Energy Orbs, Hoganash can appreciate that, but we're going to be running Heavy Shield here. This is going to be a ranged variant of Hoganash. This is more similar to Krakaloa, however, think of Hoganash as a more offensive option. And this will reflect in our moveset with Fury, Fondant, and Baneful Bash. Baneful Bash is mainly here so we can stop the water types or most water types to switch in and take advantage of us. This mostly comes in with Luminami, which is always nice to see. And Bulk Up is to increase our damage. If you want to use more utility-based Hoganashes, you can replace Bulk Up for Burn Up. But in my opinion, I would just rather use Krakaloa at that point, which is always probably, in my opinion, a little bit better than Hoganash right now. And Rejuvenate here is just for recovery. Now 32 melee attack is leftovers, and of course you already know what the HP and range defense is. The ability of choice will be Sweet Touch, This will make it a little bit easier for you to do your job, as this will cripple, or has the chance to cripple, most Loomians, so this is always good for Haganash. Now onto Mocho. I used to be a very good Mocho advocate back in the day before Barbadger released, and now when Barbadger released, Mocho is kind of irrelevant. But its Sugar Rush Sweeper set still works as always. We're gonna keep it simple here with the 4 energy rule. This lets us get up to 250 energy, and we can just throw off 2 Peace of Minds or Frost Beams and whatever. And speaking of the moveset, you will notice we're running Boom Bash, Deep Freeze, and Frost Beam for our attacking moves. Deep Freeze here is so we can catch water types on the swap. This will mostly come in Cephalops, Luminami, and Barblast, so this is always pretty nice for that. Frost Beam is just for maximum damage as we can, and Boom Bash here, it's our second coverage move. This will help us deal with metal types and typeless types, more notably metal types, so this will also be really good for it. Our personality will be very smart, frail, tender. Now if you want to run a smart nimble set, which is honestly very good here, probably because of the many boot Loomians in this game, so making sure you outspeed at least some of them is always good, so you can conceal your sweep. That's always nice. And for your item of choice, chocolate bar, this will definitely proc your Sugar Rush ability. However, if you do want to run shell, that is perfectly fine. I just prefer chocolate bar because you consume it instantly and it will proc your Sugar Rush ability instantly as well. But running shells are always worth it in my opinion, so if you do find yourself in a situation where shells are always beneficial, then run that. It's mostly when you don't have a chocolate bar, but in my opinion, getting +1 on the speed with your Peace of Mind buff is always good, because once you Peace of Mind after, you're gonna have to like use your move if you're running a shell. So my opinion, Peace of Mind is just more consistent. Alright, so I think this is the second weather related Loomian, and this is going to be Whippledrift. Whippledrift, in my opinion, is pretty underrated, mainly because Glide Whippledrift does seem a pretty good idea, and also its offensive potential is very good here, so I won't put too much of my opinion here, but this Whippledrift set will be running 4 energy, not only because it is the 4 energy rule, but this will let you use 2 magnifies and a mixture of nature's forces and jet streams, which will amount up to 4 before waiting or resting. Your personality will be nimble or smart nimble in my opinion, but this nimble personality will let you outspeed from everything after a +1 up until a very nimble Gobademic. You'll outspeed that, but I'm not sure if you'll outspeed any other boot Loomians, like specifically in the high range of tiers, but nimble smart is the personality you'd want to go. This makes sure you outspeed a lot of things after a +1 and then range attack, and then just dump the rest into HP. This will let you have an odd HP set, so you can actually get 3-hit KO'd by Icicle Traps, which is always nice. And of course, Nature's Force, Jetstream, your strongest stabs. Luster Loot is here. You can try and run Photosynthesis here in case you don't have the Health Amulet for an item. And speaking of that, a Health Amulet item, Air Essence is pretty consistent, but if you do not want to run it and want to run something else, run Health Amulet because it is a sweeper in my opinion, so you might as well get as much recovery as you can while you're magnifying. And that brings me to my next point. Luster Loot only really helps against Ancient and Spirit types, so if you think you got that covered, then replace it for Photosynthesis, and then you're pretty much set for Whippledrift. And we're on to our first Vari evolution, and this is going to be Servalin. Servalin doesn't really have a really good role, mainly because it just doesn't have the coverage to compete with its predecessors. I really like comparing Servalin to Boarrok or Trumbull. It really is in this situation where it's a mix of the both, but it has the worst attributes from both. So Servalin is a bit of a weird situation here. We're gonna be a setup sweeper variant where we want to be as fast and strong as possible. We're gonna want to run very brawny here. You can run brawny nimble, but we want to make sure our bow stability procs so we actually get our boosts, and our 44 energies to get up to 250 energy, just very standard stuff. And our HP of 56 is of course leftovers. Speaking of our ability, you already know it's going to be Boast. You can try and run Vengeance, but Servalan in this speed tier, it's not really going to be the best revenge killer. You'd rather much use Loomian's like Bunary and Revenine if you want a revenge killer. And your item of choice will be the health amulets. It's just so you can get as much recovery as you can, increase that bulk or increase your longevity while you're bulking up. And your moveset of choice, Mega Chomp, it's not gonna really be the best thing, but you can hit light and plant types, so that's always good. And mind types that can hit you super effective, so Body Slam is gonna be here because it's our stab. I wouldn't rely on Raging Tackle too much because we want to preserve our longevity, because we don't really have the best defensive stats to work with. And our last will be Body Crash. You can try and run another item. I'm not really sure what other, not items, but another move, but Body Crash will help scale with bulk up, and it's going to help against the metal types. We don't really have Earthquake like Boarrok or Trumbull, so Body Crash is just going to be here for this one. Now onto Wendelin. Wendelin is going to look very simple to Globidemic, mainly because of its energy stat being the same as it. And 84 energy, luckily this will bring us to 250 energy, and we can do a mixture of a bunch of our moves, which is always nice. Our personality is going to be very nimble here because we are a cleaner. We might as well just stick to this role so we can outspeed as much as possible. You don't outspeed a very nimble Globidemic quite yet, but you do outspeed a smart nimble Zuelong, which is always not smart nimble. You don't even outspeed that, but you can consider running Brawny Nimble or Very Brawny just so you can maximize your damage. Plus, Wendelin is going to be mainly used in the lower tiers of Yu-Yu, where it's not going to be worried too much about speed. It's already one of the fastest things down there. Just run Brawny Nimble. So Very Nimble is very niche, so I would recommend Very Brawny or Brawny Nimble. And our HP are leftovers, 200 melee attack and speed, of course, max out our most important stats. And as for our coverage, you can run Body Slam in case you're afraid of Tiklipses, but mainly you don't want to do that. You're already going to be using Wendelin in most UU teams anyway, so that's pretty much what I do. I'd rather run Defensive Slash and Shadow Sprint on the same Wendelin. This will allow me to hit hard and also get priority in case there are things that do outspeed me, so this will also be pretty good. Dazzling Barrage is for dark types and spirit types that can switch in on us, and Mega Chomp is for the light types that will try to switch in on our coverage. Now onto Kirillin. This is actually my recent Kirillin set from my video, but Brawny Nimble here is what you want to run. You can make the argument for Very Nimble, but I'd rather at least hit hard with my Kirillin set. Plus, we already have a decent speed here to utilize the boot set, so this is what I would do for Kirillin. Kirillin is in a weird position as of right now because it's not really the best thing to use, mainly because of hasty and how inconsistent it can be. But with the boot set, Kirillin can turn the tides of the match, mainly because most people don't expect Kirillin, and it's really hard to set up power focus on Kirillin, mainly because of how bad its defenses are, so I wouldn't really try to do anything other than boots, but that's just my opinion. And our moveset of choice, Adaptive Assault, Fire Slam, Mega Kick, and Body Slam. These will be your 4 core main moves. You do get walled by, like, I'm pretty sure you get still walled by Luminami, but you have to try your best with Kirillin here. There's really not much other options you would run. Body Slam is just here for Loomian's that we can't hit super effectively with our other coverage moves. So that's pretty much it for Kirillin. Next, we are on to Zephyllin, and Zephyllin's gonna want to run a smart nimble set. We want to focus as much on our speed and range attack because we're going to be setting up Peace of Minds more and more as the battle progresses. Now, do note one thing here, I did mess up, so you don't want to run 200 or not 32 HP. You want to make sure your energy is odd, just so Icicle Traps doesn't 4-hit KO you, instead it 5-hit KOs you. And this will lead in very well with our item of choice, Health Amulet. This will make it so we can use as much moves as possible. Or not moves as possible. Make sure you can use as much Peace of Minds before you actually start sweeping, or in this case wall breaking. And our 68 energy, I'm not sure if I mentioned this yet, but this will be able to use 1 Peace of Mind, 1 Mudslide, and then the rest will be Resonates. And that's pretty much it for Zeppelin. You can, I'm not sure if it has Raging Howl yet, but you can try to run it with your Turbulent ability, but I wouldn't really recommend it. You might as well just stick with Resonate and keep your longevity as much as possible. Zephelin's not really as great as it was before, mainly because Wobblisk and Icicle now exist, but it is still a decent Lumian if you want to try something different. Next, we have Venilin, which is going to be a very standard barter set. If you don't want to run barter, you can run poison or other items like that. I'm pretty sure Venilin's also used to run Eerie Stare. Or like Charade, it's not really, in my opinion, that great. Venilin's probably not going to last too much long if you're trying to Eerie Stare on something that wants to stay in. So I wouldn't really try that, and in my opinion, I would rather make my Venilin more utility focused. For energy roll, get up to 250 energy. This is pretty standard stuff for Venilin. And of course, we're bartering away the heavy shackles here. And our ability of choice will be Devious. This will let it so you can bypass abilities such as Stratosaurs. You can poison them, which is always very nice to have. Your personality here will be very clever. This is so you can tank as much range hits as possible. You can help against Loomian's like Dragoon. You can barter off your things. You don't really do as much damage as to it, so just barter off your heavy shackles to it. Bartering Bellatrix is also really great because you will render it useless, but you'll also kind of screw yourself over because you're also going to get the boots. It's just pretty decent for most range attackers. It's also pretty decent against Ikazune, which is always good. And 96 melee defense is leftovers. And Adaptive Assault is going to be our main poison stab. We don't have Muck Blast yet, and we still have Mud Spatter here. And of course, Rejuvenate is to make ourselves have more longevity. Venilin does fit very well with the Heavy Shield, so if you don't want to run a barter set, then you can run Heavy Shield and run moves such as Charade and or Poison if you're into that. So now on to Wrestling. There's not really much I can say on Wrestling, honestly. There's not really a lot of positive things I can say for it because it doesn't really have a lot of coverage and it suffers greatly from that. However, Driving Force here is going to be one of our core moves in my opinion. This will help it so you can pressure the opponents into switching. It's definitely not going to be as good as it is in OU, so I would recommend using Resilient in UU if you do have to. It's pretty decent down there. And your HP stat of 84, this is always leftovers. And for our 16 energy, this will let us use 1 bulk up, and I'm pretty sure the rest will be adaptive assaults and combinations of driving forces. Our personality here will be Brawny Nimble. If you want to max out your damage output with Ace, then you of course go very Brawny. Fire Slam isn't doing a lot anyway, so you'd probably try and maximize your damage output, but Brawny Nimble is more consistent. Nimble will let you outspeed such things like Nimble Falkyries, which is kind of important here. And your item will be the Brawler Essence. We don't want to run shells here because we are going to be running Driving Force, so if we have a shell boosted Driving Force, that's not really the best thing to do, and it just keeps our damage consistent throughout the match. And now we are on to Buzzlin. Buzzlin is also going to be a simple set here. We want to run Vigorous and Volcanic Ash. There are the Marksman Buzzlin sets, but honestly, this metagame, it's not really great. Buzzlin in OU is just not great at all. There are just a bunch of ice types roaming around. There's not a lot of ways that Buzzlin can be a perfect sweeper, and at that, so Vigorous Buzzlin is what I'd go for. Ability will be Vigorous and Volcanic Ash. Even if you do have 99 melee attack, you still do hit decently hard because of the Vigorous ability. and you want to run 4 energy just for the 4 energy rule, 96 HP, and the rest into your melee attack and speed. Our personality will be very nimble here. Our speed here is very competitive, and since we don't have boots, very nimble will be very useful for outspeeding potential boot Loomians in the speed tier. However, you can run brawny nimble or even very brawny if you're using this against more bulkier teams, but just know very nimble is a safe personality for Buzzolin. Our adaptive assault is going to be our main move, but Baneful Bash and Nosedive are going to be our extra coverage moves. We don't really have a lot going for Buzzolin because Buzzolin doesn't have a lot of good coverage moves, so these are the only ones we have as of right now. And of course, Barter is to barter away our Volcanic Ash in case we find a situation where we don't need them anymore, and then can cripple melee walls such as Obsidian, which is always nice. However, I wouldn't really try doing that because they're probably mostly Mysterious Dust. You can try and run Tribute, which is pretty much free momentum for your side, but pick your poison here because you wouldn't want to sub in Barter, so you would rather have it sub in for one of your coverage moves, which can prove pretty troublesome in case you do find matchups where you need all 3 instead of where you only have 2. Tundrolin is up next, and this is a pretty standard set here. 36 energy, so we can have 250 energy, 202 HP and melee defense, and the rest will go into our melee attack just so we can scale our bulk ups a little bit more better. Our personality will be very robust, sluggish, clumsy, mainly because we don't use range attack attacks, and we of course don't care about our speed here because it is already kind of low. Our ability, Resilience, will allow us to tank more melee hits more consistently. In my opinion, Tundrolin does this way worse than Obsidian because Ice is not really the best defensive solo typing, but it kind of works with it, so yes. If you do not have a Resilience Tundrolin, then I wouldn't really use Tundrolin, but at that point, I would try to use Mysterious Cloak. I'm pretty sure that's the ability called, or the other ability where Insulated, but Resilience is the best ability one on this. Mysterious Dust will be our item of choice here, mainly because we don't want to run a heavy item on our energy, and this will also prevent us from being burnt, which is always nice. And our moveset, Ice Hammer, Body Crash are 2 main moves. Body Crash is skill with our defense, Ice Hammer because it's stab. Rejuvenate is to set up, give us more longevity, and Bulk Up is so we can set up our damage and bulk even further. Next, we are on to Pyrolin. Pyrolin is going to be a simple set here. I contemplated putting in my Robust Clever set, but honestly, Pyrolin here just works so much well as a very clever set. Pyrolin here will help you against Loomians like Stratosaur, which is always nice. It can provide a pretty solid check to range attackers such as Ikazune, Shawchi, Zuelong. It's pretty versatile in what it can actually wall, and because of that, we want to max out our HP and range defense. This will be very good for us so we can take as much range hits as possible, and the rest of our TPs go into the defense and energy stat. Very clever, of course, max out our defenses and our ability Fanning Flame. This will help us against air types, so we'll only really have 2 weaknesses at the end of the day, which is very great. And for our item, it's going to be Mysterious Dust. This is mainly so we can prevent ourselves from getting poisoned or getting paralyzed, because some of the Loomians we are facing, such as Shawchi and Ikazune, they do have the possibilities of putting an ailment on us, which is not really the best. But if you don't want to run Mysterious Dust, running pearls such as the Wave or Terra Pearl is always a good alternative. Fire Breath and Shrewd Blast. Well, Shrewd Blast is pretty niche. If you do struggle with spirit types such as Harvestect, Vesperatu, well, not Vesperatu, Ursoul, for whatever reason, then of course run Shrewd Blast. This also goes for Icicle too. And Burn Up, you can run Peace of Mind, but if you do not have hazard removal, then of course Pyrolin is going to be a pretty decent sub for that. And Rejuvenate here is pretty obvious, just so we can have our longevity. And as for Shrewd Blast, it's the fourth move slot in terms of Pyrolin's coverage is pretty self-explanatory. If you want to run Boom Bash because you struggle with typeless types or some types that you can hit with Boom Bash, go ahead. But in my own personal experience, Shrewd Blast seems to be a little bit more better. Now onto Oxydrake. Oxydrake is going to be a pretty similar Loomian to Pyrolin, but it just swallows more, and not more, but more different Loomians, such as Deldrix. It can be a pretty solid check to that, and it shows because its range defense is pretty decent on this one because we're running Very Clever and 200 HP. This will also be pretty good, so we can max out our defenses. Since it already has a pretty decent energy stat, you don't want to ruin it by going into more energy, so 4 energy is fine. And our defense of 96, its leftovers. You can put this on the melee attack if you want, but in my opinion, I'd rather just focus on the bulk here. Our ability of choice will be Oxidize, mainly because I think it's our more defensive ability, but if you want to run combative, so you can try and swap in on Eerie Stares, Terrifying, Charades, stuff like that, you can do that. And our item of choice will be the Mysterious Dust, so we can prevent ourselves from getting burnt. If you do not want to run Mysterious Dust, then heavy items such as the Heavy Shield is always nice. And for our moveset, Steel Crusher, Rejuvenate, Primal Slash, and Driving Force. Do notice that this is the utility version, so we're going to be running Bulk Up here, but if you do not want to run Driving Force for whatever reason, then you can run Bulk Up. However, if you do want to run both, then I would suggest replacing Primal Slash for Bulk Up, mainly because it doesn't offer, in my opinion, doesn't offer as much compared to Steel Crusher in terms of coverage. Now onto Harvesect. Harvesect is going to be very simple here, V Brawny, so you can scale your parasitizes a lot more better. And of course, 200 HP, 200 melee attack. This is so we can max out our more important stats. And for our personality, very brawny, already said so. I already said this. And our ability will be Life Horse because it is our only ability. And our item of choice will be the Power Cuffs. This is so we can abuse the fact that we have no energy, so we can just use as much moves as we want. However, you can also use this to other heavy items such as the Heavy Armor or Heavy Shield, and you can tweak the TPs into living different hits from such as Zuelong or other stuff. So do note you can do that, but I would just stay consistent with the Power Cuffs. Make sure you deal as much damage with Parasitize to the point where even if you do face a resisted Loomian, you're not gonna waste enough HP to the point where Parasitize was a waste. So I'd say Power Cuffs is the best for Harvesect here. Bulk Up, Driving Force, and Soulstorm. This is so we can provide utility with Harvesect and of course hit opposing spirit types with Soulstorm. However, if you do struggle with fire types, you can try and run Earthquake, but in my opinion, this is the coverage you'd want to run. Now we are on to Wintrix, and Wintrix is going to be a pretty weird Loomian to run. There are a lot of advocates for Brain Freeze, Frostbeam, Peace of Mind, and I can't remember the last move, but basically they drop Aeroblade and they just run Pure Ice. And because it is Wise Wintrix, you don't really get resisted by stuff, and plus Airblade is just free Pyrolins, then I would guess that, but just to be consistent here, we're going to be running Peace of Mind 3 attacks. Of course, if you don't want to run Airblade, I would suggest Brain Freeze or Perch if you do want to run that. So that is perfectly understandable if you don't want to run Peace of Mind 3 attacks. 68 energy here is going to be pretty useful because we can use 1 Airblade, 1 Peace of Mind, and then the rest can be Frost Beams. And for our range attack and speed, they're pretty much to max those out, and our 32 HP are the leftovers. Our personality will be very smart, so we can deal as much damage as possible. If you do not want to run Tender, because we do have Peace of Mind, then of course you can run Foolish. And if you don't want to decrease any defenses at all, then it is perfectly understandable, so you could run Smart Nimble. After all, Wintrix's speed tier is pretty competitive, so you would try and want to run as much speed as possible. Your ability of choice will be Wise here. There is not much abilities you'd want to run on a Wintrix, and your Ice Essence is going to be your item. If you do have the ability to run Health Amulet on a non-perch Wintrix, go ahead, but this is more consistent as you can boost your Brain and Frost Beams. Now onto Snagoop. Snagoop is going to be a more utility-based Snagoop because in my opinion, Marksman doesn't really offer much in this metagame when Loomians similar in Snagoop's speed tier offer a lot more offense potential, and we'd much rather have Snagoop do its utility because it does offer some nice utility with Barter and Provoke. Provoke is so we can stop Loomians from setting up on us, which is a pretty common occurrence with most Snagoop sets, and our ability Immunized will work very well with our Volcanic Ash item, as we can barter this out to pretty much most Loomians that would like to switch in on us. For example, we can cripple Loomians such as Icicle and Wobblisk, who are pretty common switches because they are ice types and most likely the clever sets. We can also cripple Loomians such as Tyrex, who can try and set up on us, but I wouldn't really recommend that. Can cripple Setamars who are running Thunder Chomps and very clever, who can try and take our hits. There's just a lot of ways we can use Volcanic Ash Barter, which is very good for Snagoop as of right now. And its 88 HP is going to be leftovers 12 energies to make us to 250 energy. This is so we can use a mixture of Barters, Provokes, Muck Blasts, and Jet Streams. And our Smart Nimble here, this is so we can not decrease our defensive stats, since we do have some sort of defensive utility with resists to Brawler, Toxic, and immunities to Earth, which is very nice. And of course, Smart Nimble will increase the stats that we want to have and are pretty important. So now onto Tsukame. Tsukame is going to be running a very simple set here. Energy Orb will allow us to use more of our moves, mainly because our energy stat isn't really the best to use heavy items, and of course shells or pearls aren't really the best for Tsukame, so running Energy Orb here does seem to fit in my opinion. Speaking of energy, 56 energy TPs will allow us to use 2 Rejuvenates, 2 Maroons, 1 Frost Beam, and 1 Body Crash. And our 44 range defense are leftovers, while our 200 HP and melee defense are to max out our more important stats. Our personality here will be very robust, so we can maximize our defense that we are high in, and of course increase Body Crash scaling. And our ability Quick Recovery here, this is so we can prevent ourselves from getting status like burns, poisons, freezes, paralyzes. It's just really good, and pretty much Tsukame's only really good defensive ability. And our item here will be the Energy Orb, like I said, to use as much moves as possible. Tsukame only really has a defensive niche in UU. It doesn't really have the best thing in OU because they're just so much better defensive water types and defensive melee types. It's just not really the best for Tsukame in OU right now, but in the lower tiers, it definitely is pretty decent. I don't know what to make of it, honestly. I used this set during one of my tournaments. It's pretty annoying, and because Bantrino doesn't really have a lot of niches, its only really good niche is the Stall Breaker / Annoyance. All this Bantrino set does is just make your opponent more annoyed even more and slowly drain their HP with your moveset. Speaking of your moveset, you want to run Sap Plant to drain the opponent's HP, Dodge so you can proc that Sap Plant even more, Baffle so you can get out of the battle very easily, and Slap Down so we can abuse this chance to get rid of the opponent's items as much as possible. Now, for our robust, nimble personalities, this is so we can do as much as we can on our defense side. We don't want to sacrifice any defenses here, so going for 2 positive personalities are fine. You can go into whatever you want. I just think Banfino has a little bit more better matchups against melee attackers. And for your ability Sly, there's not really a lot of abilities Banfino would like, so Sly is what I'd go with. And Health Amulet, because we're not running photosynthesis here, we'd rather have as much recovery as possible. So that's always nice. And for our energy stat, in reality, there's not really much of energy you'd want to put on this thing, but if you really want to, this energy is for 5 baffles, or not 4 baffles and 2 dodges. And of course, you can sub in those moves for other moves, which can round up to 240 pretty easily. 200 speed is so we can make ourselves as much fast as possible. And of course, 200 HP, get as much HP as possible, and will help our sap plant and health amulet gains. Alright, now on to Kanibo. Kanibo is going to be running a boot set. Now, in all honesty, Kanibo is not really the best thing in this metagame as of right now, because there are just a little bit more better melee attackers on the melee wall breaking side, mostly talking about Loomian'S such as Barbadger, Halvantic. It's just not really the best for Kanibo right now, but it's still pretty decent to the point where I guess if you want to use something fun, then Kanibo is for you. And for your energy TPs, this is mainly so you can use a Clobber, a Ranging Tackle, and a mixture of Body Slams and Ice Hammers. Because we are running boots here, we want to be as fast as possible, so going Nimble or Brawny Nimble or Very Brawny is pretty much fine here. However, since we do have boots and we are mainly just going to be utilizing our ambush ability and just using one move, switching out, and then repeats, that's pretty much what I do for Kanibo. And you want to max out your speed and melee attack stats. There's not really a lot to say for Kanibo here. It does pair really well against the same teammates that Barbadger pairs very well, and that's really telling to how, not outclassed, but how competition these melee attacking Loomian'S are. And now we are on to Samurine, and Samurine's going to be a focused sweeper here. It's not really going to be focused on much at all. It's just going to try and outspeed as much as it can at its base speed, and of course do as much as it can from there. Its personality is going to be Brawny Nimble. This is mainly so we can outspeed as much as possible while also dealing as much damage as possible as well. Our moveset of choice will be the Steel Crusher, Thunder Chomp, Aqua Jaws, and Sharpen. I'm pretty sure you do have Plunge, but because it does waste, quote-unquote, waste a turn, Aqua Jaws is way more consistent in my opinion, so I would use that. And as for our Alright, now onto Samurine. Samurine's gonna be a pretty simple sweeper here. It's gonna be focused on outspeeding as much as it can without sacrificing too much defenses before it gets its rev up boost. And that's pretty much all you need to know for Samurine. Usually, I'd want to use this late to endgame just so you guarantee your sweep here, and that's pretty much I would use for Samurine 4. I wouldn't use it as a wall breaker, just use it as a sweeper or cleaner in the late to end game of the battle. If you can sneak in some hits with it in the beginning of the match, make sure it actually does matter, because most of the time your wall breakers would probably benefit more if they swapped in the battle first more than Samurine. Now, for its personality, Nimble is going to let you outspeed a 200 speed non-boots Halvantic, because people still try to run bulk upsets on Halvantic. However, if you do not want to just outspeed that, you can invest more to outspeed or potentially outspeed very smart Tiklipses, which you can try outspeed with your Nimble personality, but other than that, I wouldn't try. Your 28 energy will let you use 5 Steel Crushers or 2 Sharpens and 4 Steel Crushers, just a mixture of those 2 moves and the rest of your moves, and your 120 HP is just gonna be your leftovers. As for your melee attack, you want to max this out as much as possible. You have to sharpen a lot to make sure your melee attack actually does do decent damage, because while 117 is a lot, you probably need a little bit more sharpens to actually start sweeping the match. And your item of choice will be the health amulet, because your defensive typing is pretty decent, this health amulet will actually be pretty useful because since your defensive typing is kind of good, you can utilize that and set up more with your health amulet, gaining longevity as you rise in power, which is always very nice. Now onto Lumelo. There's not a lot of things I would suggest or say about Lumelo here. Just know that because Lumelo does have the potential to run 2 sets of barbs or 2 sets of hazards, I just wouldn't try. Barbs is more consistent than poison barbs is, so I would just run barbs as of right now. It's gonna be simple here. 4 energy, 36 or 96 range defense. Make sure you max out the stat you do more well in, and that is your melee attack stat or melee defense stat, mainly because you do have better matchups against melee attackers. Your personality is going to be very robust, so we can max out our melee defense, and Sharp Edges is going to be our ability of choice. It is our best defensive ability, and it does chip in melee attackers, which is always nice. And its item of Health Amulet will allow us to gain more longevity as we stay more longer in the battle. Our moveset of choice will be Barbs, Hydro Slash, and Baneful Bash. Baneful Bash will help against opposing water types and plant types, and Barbs is just so we can set up damage for our team, and Hydro Slash is our best water move I think as of right now, and Bulk Up will help us increase our damage and defense if we do have to set up in that situation. Alright, now onto Taoshinu. Taoshinu is gonna be a very simple set. You just want 4 energy for 250 energy. This does work well with your moveset. And that's pretty much all you want to know for your TPs, because you're going to want to max out your defenses in the range defense side. Taoshinu does have a decent role, as you can passively check Lumians such as Ikazune without Magnify, of course, and Doladrix, so it does have that going for it. And I would put the rest into its melee defense, mainly because Taoshinu is a typeless type, so it doesn't really fare well against most melee attackers since they're mostly dark, spirit, brawler, etc. Not really the best. Your ability here will be Enchanted Coat, so you can take 25% less of super effective hits, which is always very nice. And your item of choice will be the big Mysterious Dust, so you can stop yourself from getting burnt, which will heavily decrease your melee attack stat. And of course, other poisons, paralyses, and freezes, just overall. Blind Spot Batter and Mega Chomp will be your main 2 moves because typeless moves don't really offer a lot. Bulk Up is to set up if you do have to go down that route. And your Rejuvenate here is of course for longevity. If you want to run a Bequeath Taoshinu set, then of course replace the item of Mysterious Dust for your Rageful plushie so you can potentially get some boosts. Of course, keep Bulk Up there for more potential boosts, and then replace Mega Chomp or Blind Spot Batter for your Bequeath. I wouldn't really run Bequeath in this metagame, specifically on Taoshinu, because in my opinion, it doesn't really offer that much in terms of utility because it's just Bulk Up and it has pretty low attack. But if you do want to try and do that, then of course, go on right ahead. Now we are on to Lyricat here. Lyricat is a pretty simple set you want to run here. There's not much personalities I would go for other than very nimble. Lyricat kinda doesn't hit hard without it, but your speed tier is very competitive and you are going to be setting up Magnifies anyway. So setting up Magnifies to do damage and having very nimble to outspeed as much as possible is always the nice personality you'd want to have. And speaking of your moveset, Resonate, Magnify, Boom Bash, and Headache Split. This will make it so you have as much coverage move as possible. And this is so like you can defend against spirit types pretty well with Headache Split. Although do note that Lyricat does need pressure on the opponent before it actually does anything. So running hazards is very good for Lyricat and etc. 96 HP is leftovers as well, and 4 energy is leftovers just for the 4 energy rule. I guess you can go for 8 energy, so I think you can use 1 Magnify, 2 Resonates, 2 Headache Splits, and 1 Boom Bash, I'm pretty sure. I'm not too sure about that though, but I would just keep it simple with the 4 energy rule. And now we're on to Buneri, which honestly there's not really a lot of things you want to use with Buneri here. Emulate here is just so we can turn into things. Specialty Boots is the Revenge Killer set, so we can make sure we outspeed whatever we're in front of. And we don't need 100 into anything else, I'm pretty sure, because we're gonna copy the TP's base stats of everything we see in front of it other than the HP and energy. So it's pretty much simple there. And as for your personality, Hyper, we do not know what we're gonna be copying, so you might as well boost the energy stat you have. And because it's only 64 base energy, and do note that even with Hyper and max energy TPs, it is only 271. So we want to run personality for Hyper personality just so we can use as much moves as we can possible when we revenge kill. Sinogre is not really the best thing in the world right now. It's honestly, in my opinion, one of the worst Loomians, but if you can find some use with this, then go ahead. If it works, I guess. With the 12 energy, you can use 1 Provoke, 1 Spectral Burst, and the rest can be Peace of Minds and Boom Bashes. There's not a lot of things that Sinogre would like in this situation, but these setup moves are pretty decent. I wouldn't run Smite on Sinogre because honestly, in my philosophy here, unless you're using it onto a wall that can't do, like it can't set up or like it can't heal, then Smite is pretty much useless because Sinogre is not strong enough to hit KO the person right after a Smite, and even then, you'd might as well use your moves twice in a row because you'd be able to true shot in that case. So Smite's not really good on Sinogre. I would rather use a Peace of Mind Provoke set, even though it is outclassed by other Loomians such as Zeppelin, who does the Peace of Mind Provoke better. Wintrix can also do the same thing. There's not really a lot of things here to do. Its speed stat, 192 TPs, lets you outspeed a nimble Falkyrie, and 86 HP are just the leftovers. There's not a lot of things that Sinogre can do in this situation. Shakedown is the ability of choice. Shakedown is so you can see what opponent items they are. Your moves aren't really the best thing in the world right now, and your abilities as well. So there's not a lot of things that you would say you'd want. And of course, Health Amulet, so we can help our provoke and set up just so we can have as much longevity as possible. Next up, we have Sorel here, and Sorel, there's not really a lot of things I can say for Sorel. Same thing goes for, it's similar to Boneri in the case where you want to invest as much as you can in energy and HP. You're going to be getting a bunch of boosts from your appetite, so there's not really much I would do here other than invest in the moves you'd want. For your moveset, you can honestly run what I'd run for your Sorel. I would run a Nosedive and Jetstream. Those are your two strongest stabs from both sides of the defense, and then pretty much everything else is what you'd pretty much want to run. It's pretty self-explanatory. Because the appetite is so unpredictable, you can run many different movesets on Sorel and it can work. I'm not the most expert on Sorel, and you'd much rather find on your own success for your Sorel set. Speaking of personalities, Nimble or Hyper works here. Nimble can be pretty good if you are getting a bunch of speed boosts, and you can pretty much outspeed anything in the game. And because you can try and run Hyper just because you don't know what you're getting boosts on, but do remember that you do have high energy already, so there's not really much point in trying to invest in any or like to have a Hyper personality. But if you do want to do that, then go right on ahead. Now onto our Fiskarna set. This Fiskarna set will be utilizing the very clever nature just so we can increase our stratagem damage, and we already do decently well against most range attackers. But if you don't want to run very clever, robust, clever, or even very robust as a water type can be pretty great. However, do note most bulky water types, specifically Barblast and Luminami, are already melee focused, so there's really not any point if you're trying to just be like them. So I would rather take the very clever route and increase your defenses while increasing stratagem's damage. Not to mention, this also does help you separate yourself from them, as you can now bounce hazards and provide amazing damage for your team. On that note, 20 energy will let us use 2 Peace of Minds and 2 Mudslides and 2 Tsunamis. Do note that these Mudslides can be subbed in for stratagems, so you're not totally locked into this form of moves. And for the 200 HP and range defense, these are pretty obvious. Max out our defenses, and the rest will be going into melee defense. The ability of choice will be Regift. This is so we can utilize ourselves for basically bouncing back hazards, although this isn't really useful other than for regifting against Gargolem defenses and Searknights, as well as Gargolem speeds for that matter. Gobidemic isn't really the best to bounce hazards against, mainly because it is a toxic type and it does have clutch plushie most of the time, so if not careful it will win the 1v1 against you. So I would only really use this against Gargolem defenses, which are pretty common. Searknights, but to be honest, are not really common, and as well as the Gargolem speeds. You can also use this against Wobelisk and other hazard setters, so it's not the end of the world if you don't find the 3 that I've mentioned. And as for items, Health Amulet, already Longevity, Mudslide, Tsunami. The Mudslide will make it sure that you get rid of hazards on your side no matter what, even if you're not in the battle, to regift the hazards back. Tsunami, it's just your main stab move. Peace of Mind to increase our damage, and Bulk and Stratagem to scale with our defense and the Peace of Mind. Alright, so for Baneki, we're going to be focused as a sweeper. Our personality will be very nimble here. You can run Smart Nimble, I think Smart Nimble, and then you can run either the Plant Essence or a Plant Shell, I'm pretty sure. And you could beat a 1v1 against a Stratosaur, which supposedly quote-unquote walls you, but not really. So you can run it for that, but very nimble personality is what I'd go for, mainly because it fits with its role as a cleaner and sweeper. Its speed tier is very competitive, so you try and want to outspeed as much as possible. Now, for energy roll is simple here. You don't really need to invest in too much already because your energy stat is already good enough for you to use 2 poisons or magnifies, a mixture of those two, and the rest can be landslides and nature forces. Your 200 range attack and speed will make sure you outspeed as much as you can while still hitting pretty hard, and 96 HP is the leftovers. Do note that you can make this HP stat odd, which is probably the best thing you can do right now because you are weak to icicle traps, and with this in mind, because you are weak to icicle traps, making it so you are 3 hit KO'd by it is always very nice to have. Pretty viable in my opinion, well, at least for its anomaly set, now that it actually does have a full moveset of moves where it can actually take advantage of. Now, for its moveset in specific, Thorn Slam will allow you to boost your melee attack even more with anomaly, and Wave Wrecker, Sapland, and Primal Slash will be your other 3 moves. Sapland is mainly here because we don't really have a 4th move slot of damage yet, or a viable one at that. So running Sapland can be good because we can put this down on fire types, which is pretty nice, and possibly like win the 1v1 with them because we do have Wave Wrecker here. It is a very good water stab, which is always nice, and Primal Slash will help us against Obsidians. We can like Saplant in front of them and then Primal Slash, which can set up to be pretty strong in damage, even like after our Thorn Slam as well, so we are +1 melee attack. There's just a bunch of things you'd want to do with a Sea Drake, which is always pretty good. Now, for our energy stat will make it so we can use 1 Thorn Slam and then 4 Wave Wreckers. You can of course sub in these Wave Wreckers for a mixture of Saplants and Primal Slashes. Do note that you are not limited to these stuff. 24 HP is the max we can put, so we are having a odd HP stat. So we do get 5 hit KO'd by Icicle Traps, and 8 range defense here is just for leftovers. And you do notice that there is 4 TPs missing, I'm pretty sure. That's because it wouldn't fit evenly in our other stats. Now, on to Holvantic. Holvantic, finally, one of the more solid Loomians after what it seems like a drought of actual good Loomians, but Holvantic here is very solid. In my opinion, Pitch Black Specialty Boots Halvantic is the best Halvantic, as this will allow you to run poison more consistently and have more consistent personalities that will make you fast and still hit hard. The personality I wouldn't really recommend very brawny, mainly because you already do hit hard enough with your moveset, and with Brawny Nimble you can still hit hard while still outspeeding more stuff with specialty boots, which in my opinion is very great. Also, another thing to add, your defensive typing isn't really the best, so that also adds to the Boots Halvantic train that I'm trying to, not train, but Boots Halvantic cause that I'm trying to say. So if you do want to run bulk up, the set is just pretty much the same. You just run a shell or an essence instead of the boots and then replace bulk up for poison, but honestly, Boots Halvantic is pretty great. You can cripple walls such as Tyrex, Obsidian, Harvesect, Icicle, and Wobblisk, stuff that would like to switch in on you, now they can't, which is very nice. Primal Slash here is mainly for spirit types, Thunder Crash is our main stab move, and Gnarly Gash will be able to hit as hard as Thunder Crash, if not more, in most situations because of our ability Pitch Black. Now our 96 energy, I think I already mentioned this, but this is 275 energy. This will let you use 1 poison and 5 gnarly gashes, which is nice. 200 melee attack and speed, make sure you max those out. And your 4 energy is just the leftovers. Alright, now on to Imperior. This is going to be a more offensive focus set because we are running Smart, Nimble, Very Frail. Our ability of choice will be Resentful here, so we can try and cripple Loomian's when we die, which is always very nice. If you do not want to run this, then run Devious, but in my opinion, I don't really see a useful utility for Devious when we're running this moveset. Our 44 energy TPs will let us use 2 Peace of Minds, 1 Shrewd Blast, and 1 Dark Surge, and 1 Boom Bash. Or no, 2 Peace of Minds, 2 Shrewd Blasts, 2 Dark Surges, and 1 Boom Bash. That's what I meant to say. And the range attack and speed will make sure we outspeed as much as possible while still hitting pretty hard. You can try and run Very Nimble on Imperior, so you can outspeed as much as you can. But in my opinion, because there are things such as cleaners and you want to do damage with this sweeper set, I wouldn't go Very Nimble, but ultimately it's up to you. Your item of choice will be the Health Amulet, so you can gain HP while you're setting up your Peace of Minds, but if you do not have the ability to run Health Amulet, you can run a Dark Essence and that would be just fine. Mainly a hyper-focused damage set. Now, Hyper still does a butt ton of damage to a bunch of Loomians. I wouldn't really try and run a defensive set, mainly because its defensive typing is not really the best right now in my opinion, but you can get away with this on more defensive, bulkier teams, so do know that Hyper is not your only option. And as for our TPs, this energy stat will allow us to outspeed, or not to increase our damage scaling even further. And with our HP stat, 192 maxes out our HP with maxing out our HP while still keeping it odd, so we get 5 hit KO'd by Icicle Traps. And the 72 speed, I'm pretty sure will outspeed 70 sluggish Cynamoths and Himbrrs, so we can get the jump at them on Nature's Force, I'm pretty sure, so that's good. And our item of Energy Orb will allow us to conserve more energy. Now, I don't know what's with people with Energy Orb, I'm pretty sure it doesn't decrease damage because while we're using less energy for our moves, it's not about the cost of moves, it's about the amount of energy you have. So I'm not really sure in what people are trying to say about the Energy Orb. However, if you do not have it, then it's fine. Kabunga Coffee and Chocolate Bar are not Chocolate Bar, but Kabunga Coffee is also a pretty good one to have, and you can also run different essences and health amulets as well. As for your moveset, Peace of Mind will obviously be your main move to set up, and Spectral Bursts, Nature Forces, and Nova Blasts will be the main ways you can get off damage. Do note that it's still very weak to dark types, so I wouldn't really want to use this against most dark types at all. So Holly Bunch, just be careful of those and you're pretty much fine for what you can do. Alright, now we're on to Barbadger. Now, for the longest time, I really wanted to use a Boots Barbadger, but after realizing it now, it just looks so much better as a Brawn Boost Dauntless set, mainly because it can deal so much more damage compared to a Boots set where you don't really have the freedom of choice where you can use different moves in different situations. And because your move coverage is so good, I'd much rather use it to its advantage rather than just locking myself into one move. So with this moveset, this makes it pretty easy to see what we're trying to do here. With our very brawny personality, we're going to try and be as bulky as possible, or not bulky, but as hard hitting as possible. Our item of choice will be the Brawler Essence to scale our most hardest hitting move, and our Dauntless ability will of course get boosts off of Loomian'S that can hit us super effectively. This can be in the form of walls, because there are walls that can hit us super effectively and we can take advantage of that. So that will also be very nice. 200 speed is to max out our speed stat, which is very great. We can also outspeed very smart Falkyries with this, so yes. And the energy stat here, this will make it so we can use Clay Slaps, Brawn Boosts, and Ice Hammers more safely. And this is also pretty great here. And 88 HP are just the leftovers. And as for Dragoon won't need a lot of energy because it already has the energy it really needs. 250 is already enough for Dragoon here. You can just put 4 energy into the energy rule here. There's not much you'd want to do for Dragoon, but honestly, this is a set you want to run. Now for my Dragoon video, I accidentally meant 88. I actually said 8 speeds, TPs, lets you outspeed Sluggish Stratosaur. It's actually the other way around. You need 88 speed. If you want to run more speed Dragoon sets with, for some reason, boots, which what people try to run when it released, there's really no point. You'd much rather use your bulk to your advantage, because Dark Air is a pretty decent typing and you can take advantage of most of the walls right now, such as Setamars. If you can take advantage of those. Stratosaurs, Obsidians, those kind of stuff. Your personality here will be very smart. This is so you can deal as much damage as possible while sacrificing as little as you can. You can go foolish here for your tender personality instead, but this will make it so I think at least Protogon gets a melee or a range attack increase on you, which is not really the best. So go tender here. Clumsy, or not clumsy, frail I meant to say, not clumsy. I meant to put frail there instead so we can decrease the stat we're not using. And our ability will be Anomaly here, very simple stuff. The item of choice will be Health Amulet. Because we are pretty bulky, we can use that to our advantage and start setting up Draco Beams even faster. But if you do not have Health Amulet on Dragoon and you have it on something else, then of course use a Dark Essence, or in this case an Ancient Essence, to scale Dragoon or scale Draco Beam more, which is pretty good. Provoke is very good here because, like the Rogo, you can stop Loomian'S such as Wobblisk from setting up barbs on you. Wobblisk is a very common answer for Dragoon, so that will be very good. Draco Beam, of course, your main move you're going to be clicking all the time. And for your other move sets, Jetstream and Egg Storm are going to be your last remaining moves. Egg Storm because it's stab and it's 90 base power, and Jetstream, it can help you in some cases with fire types and bug types, but overall Jetstream isn't something you'd want to click most of the time. Alright, now on to Charonix. I'm going to be running a very smart priority set. This can make it so we can abuse its defensive typing while also still having some speed elements. Speaking of speed elements, for our speed TPs of 32, this will let us outspeed a sluggish, non-invested Setamars, which is always nice. Even though Setamars might wall us for a little bit, we can set up Magnify when it's pretty low, and we can finish it off at that point. For our 20 energy, we're going to be able to use a mixture of Apparitions and a mixture of Apparitions and Nova Blasts to sum up to 4. And then the rest can be Magnifies, or 2 Magnifies and Lightspeed Rays, summing up to 2. So that's very useful. 200 HP and 200 range attack is to max out our more important stats. while our HP stat isn't high, because we're putting in 200 investment points in this, it will make our melee and range defense a little bit more higher. And of course, 48 melee defense is the leftovers that we have for right now. Our ability will be Reaper here. It's mainly because we can gain HP for when we do kill something, or I think either HP or energy. But if you do want to run the Radiance ability because it's gonna get the fog setting ability soon, then of course do that. And the item of choice will be the Light Essence because Lava Blast is hitting a little bit more harder than Apparitions. Alright, now on to Billaforge. Billaforge is going to be Jolty's set here. He's going to showcase this thing pretty soon, I'm pretty sure. So, can't wait for that. Its energy TPs of 28 is very standard. 250 energy, lets you use 2 Peace of Minds and a mixture of Fire Breaths and Muck Blasts and Landslides, summing up to 4 moves, and then you have to rest or wait. Very smart will be the personality here because Billaforge kind of has low speed and we're not using melee attack here. Go for Frail. However, if you want to use mixed Billaforges yet, I haven't really experimented much with Billaforge, so I'm not the best person to ask for mixed Billaforge sets, but you can try if you want to. The ability here will be Blistering Heat because it works well with our moveset enough to the point where it's not as less versatile as our other abilities. And the item of choice here will be the Fire Essence, so it can deal as much damage with Fire Breath as possible. If you have the opportunity to run Health Amulet, I wouldn't pass it up here, but other than that, there's not really a lot of things I would use other than the Fire Essence. Alright, now on to Sherbot or Sherbet. I don't really know how to say this thing. I'm just going to call it Sherbot. We're going to be running the Sugar Rush ability here, so we can try and sweep teams, although it's probably not going to happen because of how trash our base stats are, but we can try our best here. Our personality will be Smart Nimble. This is so we can hit hard with our range attack stats while also being pretty fast and of course make Sugar Rush work. Our item of choice here will be the Chocolate Bar. You can try and run a shell here, but in my opinion, Chocolate Bar is more consistent because once we use a move, it instantly procs Sugar Rush, so that's what we're going to be running here. 68 energy will allow us to use 2 Peace of Minds, 2 Out of Orders, and 2 Metal Blasts. And of course mix and match with the Peace of Minds and Jet Streams. Just do note that it's going to take out energy from your Out of Order and Metal Blast moves. And like I said, Chocolate Bar is to proc Sugar Rush faster. You can run shells if you want. It's ultimately up to you. I just prefer Chocolate Bar. And your rest of your TPs will go into HP because there's not really anything else we can benefit other than the HP investments. Alright, and now we are on to Dusket. Dusket is going to be a UU mixed sweeper. It's not, as far as my knowledge, it's not one of the best in the UU meta right now, but because of its mixed nature, we now have Outburst, which actually helps very well against some of the UU Loomians down there, more specifically Infernix, helps our matchups against that. And our 56 energy TPs will allow us to get up to 275, which can get to us to use 2 Peace of Minds and 4 Psychoblasts. And speaking of Outburst, Outburst will allow us to 2-hit KO an Infernix, assuming we're at max energy, which is always nice, so you can use this when you want. Our ability here will be Mean-Spirited, so we can abuse the fact that our teammates can status opponents, and then we can use our Mean-Spirited to proc that, which is always nice. Our item of choice will be the Health Amulet, so it can help us get longevity as we set up Peace of Minds. But if you cannot run that, then of course run essences like the Dark or Mind Essence if you really want to, and the rest of our TPs will go into HP. Now, if you don't want to run Outburst, you can run other moves such as Spectral Burst, although it doesn't really offer as much coverage compared to Outburst. And you can just use a bunch of moves you want. You just want Peace of Mind, Dark Surge, and Psycho Blast on your Dusket. Alright, now on to Ikazune. Ikazune is going to be a wall breaker set. You can run not Power Cuffs, but you can run Specialty Boots, which is one of my favorite sets, but honestly, Because Ikizune does have a pretty decent energy, or not energy stat, but a decent speed stat already, I wouldn't see much of a boots pivot set if your team is lacking some way to pivot in and out. So Ikizune is pretty versatile. Just know that the wall breaker set isn't the only set you can run. As for the move order for your energy TPs, 48 will let you use 2 magnifies, 1 energy surge, and a mix of fire breaths and thunder strike to sum up to 3. 52 HP are the leftovers, and of course you will want to have 200 range attack and speed. Of course, rechargeable isn't the only ability you can run. You can run your normal ability because secret ability roamers are hard to come by. And your item here will be power cuffs because you have a lot of energy to run. Now, do note that because you do have the specialty boots set you can run, you can't really round up to a safe energy spot to get up to 300 energy without wasting around 104 TPs. So do note that that's what you'll have to do for boot sets, but I think the wall breaker sets for Ikizune at the very least looks pretty solid. Next up we have Protogon, which is going to be the Deja Vu cleaner set. Deja Vu isn't really as great with Protogon as it was before. A lot of things are adapting to the point where it can't get analyze boosts accordingly. So you can try and run mixed Protogons if you want to, but ultimately the range set is the base set you want to use, and if you want to mix in mixed attacking moves, I'm pretty sure it has Steel Crusher, I'm pretty sure, or a decent melee attacking move for the metal type, you can of course use that, and you can abuse that on Loomians such as Vanillin and other stuff that would appreciate it. Now onto Protogon's TPs. For the 44 energy TPs, this will allow you to use 5 Metal Blasts and 1 Deja Vu, I'm pretty sure, so that is always nice. And for its HP stat, its leftovers, and its range attack and speed, that's pretty much to max out your more important stats. Nimble is wanted here, even though Lumi's in your speed tier already outspeed you anyway. You can run Nimble to try and outspeed Smart Nimble Zuelongs. At least as far as I know, very Nimble Zuelongs aren't that common anymore, so you can try and get away with that. And for Smart, you do not outspeed much with Smart, so running Nimble and using yourself as a cleaner is probably the best way to go. Your ability of choice can be analyzed, and I wouldn't really try and replicate right now, but using the replicate secret ability can be good because you will basically get free swap-ins on Tiklipses almost every time, which is a very common Loomian in this metagame. So do note that analyze isn't your only ability you can run, and because you have 108 base energy, the item of power cuffs will be very good and very efficient for your movesets. Alright, now on to Mutagon. Mutagon is going to be wanting to run the tank set. If you still want to use the Quick Punch Mutagon, tank is the ability to go. Or it is debate that Mutagon isn't an Uber with the tank, but at the very least, in my opinion, I think we can all agree that tank Mutagon is still at least a top tier Loomian. Now, because we're not running heavy fists, we're going to be hitting a lot less harder, but this does mean we do get a bunch of this does mean we do get a bunch of time to set up our Brawn boost safely with tank, so we can deal as much damage as we can right after tank wears off. For 28 energy, this will actually help in with this strategy, as this will let you use 5 telekinetic sweeps and 1 Brawn boost. This will let it use so if you get in the battle for free, 1 Brawn boost while your tank's active, and then you can start sweeping with Quick Punch, Mega Punch, and Telekinetic Sweep. 104 speed, it will allow you to 184 speed will allow you to outspeed non-nimble max speed Boarrok, which is always nice. And your item of choice will be the power cuffs because you have so much energy. This will allow you to use your moves even though they are quite high costing. This will allow you to use your moves a lot more efficiently. And onto Cephalops. Cephalops is going to be a bulky utility set where we're going to be focusing on setting up as much icicle trapses and hypnotizes as possible. This is mainly so we can utilize our bulk to our advantage and set up hazards and spread around sleep paralysis. This will help get our teammates in the battle much safer and set up damage for our wall breakers to get into the battle and start doing some damage. Now, if you do not want to run these movesets, then of course you can replace these for either Square 1 or other moves like Frost Beam, but particularly in this metagame there are already a lot of good air and ice types where to the point you don't really need Frost Beam on Cephalops as long as you have those meta ice types such as Icicle, Himbrr, and Wobblisk on your team to deal with the bug types that can try and switch in on you. As for your TPs on the energy and for the rest of the things, 40 speed will allow you to outspeed a non-invested sluggish Obsidian, which are not that common as much as anymore because they're mostly judge variants, but you can take advantage of that. 88 range defense will allow you to live one hit from a very smart Zuelong. As long as they don't have an electric shell, electric essence, or a power cuffs, you're pretty much fine with those. 200 range attack is to, of course, max out your most important stats. Your 108 melee defense are leftovers, and for 60 energy, they used to work on the Square 1 sets and Hypnotize sets, but because we're not really using those moves much as anymore, you can decrease the energy to 250 if you really want to, just so you get as much of your bulk out as possible. For personality, smart obviously to scale that Soul Drain and Tsunami up, and your ability of Bloodsucker will allow you to scale Soul Drain even more, and your item of Dark Essence is just focusing on making Soul Drain as much of high power as possible. Alright, now on to Phasenaut's set. Phasenaut is going to be a pretty simple one at that. You're mainly going to want to focus on tanking melee hits or hits in general. If you want to go a more melee focused build, then of course sacrifice Nimble personality for the robust personality. But I think Nimble fits Phasenaut for what it's trying to do, as it's going to try and be a defensive Loomian, but providing utility with teardown and pivoting. So, with its nimble personality, 112 speed will allow you to outspeed a 200 speed non-nimble Tiklipse. So that's going to be very great for your Phasenaut. It'll let you get the jump on those and hit it with possible Thunder Strikes. As for your range attack really is useless at the end of the day, but if you are running to plan, or if you are planning to run a Magnify on this, then you can Magnify to +2, and now you can 2-hit KO clever Taoshinus. If the Taoshino is very clever, you will 3-hit KO them, but only by barely. So if you don't see Taoshinus a lot and they're not a big issue, which in all reality they really aren't, you can put the rest of that 80 into the speed stat or into the melee defense stat. As for the rest, you can put the rest into 200 HP, and your ability of choice will be Malware, because this is your most defensive oriented ability and will help you take away abilities such as Tahtab's Awakening and much more. For your moveset, you do have a very versatile moveset. If you do want to run double pivot, then of course you can sacrifice Teardown. Teardown Phasenaut, in my opinion, is not really the best on more balanced type teams, but if on more bulkier teams where it doesn't really have, where there's not a really lot of defensive Loomians that can take out hazards, then Teardown, of course, use that. As for the rest of your moveset, Flash and Flee is a must here because you don't really have a bunch of other coverage moves, plus it is pivot, so you can pivot out pretty safely. Rejuvenate's here because we want to heal, we are defensive, and Thunder Strike's here because it is our most powerful stab move. However, if you do want to replace it for Zip Zap and just make this a pure utility Zip Zap Flash and Flee pivot set, then of course you can do that with Phasenaut. Alright, now on to Metronet. Metronet's gonna be a very simple set. Now, the old Metronet video that I made is pretty outdated because the energy on this got heavily buffed, but because we have this much energy, we don't need any investments at all. Instead, we can proc Peace of Minds and Dark Surges as much as we want and make sure we get mixes of Hypnotize and Pyrokinesis. Now, if you don't want to run Hypnotize, I'm pretty sure Metronet has Psychoblast, so that is now warranted to use your Mind Stab. Just Dark Surge Pyrokinesis is the old and base moveset. If you want to add more moves such as Psychoblast, like I said, then go on right ahead. Nimble is to max out our speed stat as much as possible. And our range attack stat is to max out our range attack as much as possible so we hit hard and we outspeed a lot as well. Do note that because Metronet is a little bit more frail than before, Metronet's going to be very susceptible to boot Loomians and revenge killing, so you have to use Metronet in the late to the end of the battle. You can't just lead off with this and expect things to go well for you. As for your ability, Mysterious Cloak is obviously really good to prevent poisons and such as that. Your item of choice will also be Health Amulet, so you can gain more longevity as you Peace of Mind. This is also pretty great because you are less bulky than before. If you want to use other movesets such as Barter Volcanic Ashes, stuff like that, Barter Toxic Orbs, because of your Mysterious Cloak, you can do so. You would just have to replace it for Hypnotize, which isn't the end of the world. Finally, we are on to Wobblisk, and Wobblisk is going to be a little more simple than pretty much most Wobblisk sets. Your energy here is going to be very simple. You just want 8 TPs. This will allow you to use 3 layers of barbs, 1 luster loots, and the rest can be driving forces or deep freezes. Luster loot here is for opposing Ursouls because, as you can tell, our core moves of deep freeze and driving force, they are pretty much walled by Ursoul completely. And our 200 range attack and 200 range defense are just so we can max out the stats we're using. Wobblisk here can do pretty great against Dragoon sets, most Gargolems, as long as they're not running Boom Bash, which most aren't. And Deladrix is also walls Deladrix pretty well. Wobblisk is just a good Loomian around overall. As for your other TPs, 16 speed will let you outspeed a non-sluggish or a sluggish Obsidian. Will also let you outspeed some sluggish Stratosaurs, which is always very nice. And 294 range attack is the leftovers, but it will let you 2-hit KO most Nevermare sets that are running 48 HP, which is always nice. I'm going to be wanting to run 200 HP, 200 speed. This is so we can max out our speed and make sure we lead off with Flash and Freeze as much as possible. Make sure we get that damage in before we switch out. I wouldn't really recommend going max speed though. If you want to be more defensive, then of course you can use that. But because Nimare is pretty fast, I would rather utilize its speed rather than not. And as for its energy TPs, 64 TPs will let you get up to 300 energy. This will let you use a mixture of 6 Gamma Pulses, Jet Streams, or Flash and Fleece, all summing up to 6 of course. And the rest will go into melee defense as 32 TPs. Your personality here will be nimble. If you want to be robust just so you can tank better from more robust Loomians such as Volcaloa, then you can do that too. Your ability, of course, will be quick recovery here. This is mainly so you can stop yourself from getting status. And your item of choice here will be Shade Pearl. You don't really appreciate any other items other than pearls because you have quick recovery. You don't need to worry about statuses. You have Perch, so you don't need to worry about health amulets. And while you do have enough energy for heavy items, I particularly wouldn't recommend it on it just because you want as much Flash and Freeze as possible. So Pearls is what I would go for on Nimare. Now, for Nimare offensive sets, they're really simple. You just want to sub in that 200 HP into the 200 range attack and put the 32 melee defense into the HP instead, and then now you have an offensive Nimare. Do note that Nimare does want Incandescent, so it will be useful to take 2 different Nimares and have one defensive, have one offensive, and have that item, of course, be a light or air essence. Or if you really want to, you can run a health amulet, but I wouldn't really recommend it. But it can be useful if you're running Air Blade, Gamma Pulse, Peace of Mind, and then you have Flash and Flee as your 4th move option instead of Perch. And now onto Cosmere Encased. The Phasenaut and Cosmere Encased core is a bit outdated because we do have more hazard removers, but it still has pretty same effectiveness. There's only like 1 or 2 hazard setters, I'm pretty sure, that can bypass this core. But mostly Phasenaut, Cosmere Encased. Phasenaut is going to be running Tear Down, Cosmere Encased is going to have Regift, and the combination of the two will be able to block any type of Loomian from their hazards. for pretty much throughout the whole battle. You just want to make sure Cosmere Encased is in the battle before the hazard setter sets up its hazards, because then that would be very problematic. Now onto its TPs. Its energy TPs will allow you to use 1 Meteor Crash, 1 Icicle Trap, and the rest can be Slumbers and Psychoblasts. Icicle Trap is mainly here because since we're really only utility and we're only here to take off hazards, with Regift you do not need to run Peace of Mind. However, if you do want to run Peace of Mind, I suggest replacing it for Slumber and getting your Health Amulet as your item, or replacing it for Icicle Trap, because Icicle Trap is really only for hazards. You can have better hazard setters than Cosmere Encased. And as for your rest of the TPs, 16 range defense are leftovers, 200 HP and 200 melee defense are of course maxing out your defenses. Regift is of course getting rid of hazards, and Mysterious Dust can prevent you from getting poisoned, and of course will also potentially make sure that Slumber doesn't last on forever. It actually stops at least the turn after, which can be pretty good for Cosmere Encased. Alright, now on to Cosmere Cracked. Cosmere Cracked is a bit of an interesting case because I've never been the biggest fan of this, but apparently bulky Cosmere Cracks are pretty great. So, on to the TPs. 184 HP as far as I know are leftovers, as well as the range defense. However, with the HP and 56 melee defense, this does let you live a slap down from Vesperatu and then another slap down after it slaps down your Shade Pearl. This is pretty good because now you can just, if you set up 1 Peace of Mind on the first turn, you're gonna one-shot it the next turn. Even if you didn't Peace of Mind the first turn, you can do this again with Meteor Crash, which is always very nice because you are pretty weak to dark types, so this will also help your matchups. As for your speed, this will let you outspeed a very clever sluggish Fiscarna, I'm pretty sure. So that is also going to be very clever. Or not sluggish Fiscarna, but non-sluggish Fiscarnas. This does let you outspeed that, so that's pretty great. Shade Pearl, obviously, for slap downs and other dark type moves that you are kind of afraid of. And your moveset will be Meteor Crash, Psychoblast, and Peace of Mind. These are so you can have your main 2 stabs and of course have Peace of Mind to set up your damage. And Slumber here, you can run Icicle Traps, but Slumber is mainly here for recovery. If you are that worried about Slumber lasting for an eternity, then you can replace Shade Pearl for Mysterious Dust. But frankly, I think having Shade Pearl here is much more useful than having Mysterious Dust for the Slumber. And onto Cosmere Unleashed. This is a really simple set you want here. This energy investment will let you use 1 Bulk Up, 3 or 2 Meteor Smashes, and then 1 Cerebral Slash. This is always good on Powercuff's Cosmere Unleashed because it does a lot of damage and it also can dish a lot of moves out. So make sure you want this energy at 28. Usually, I would pair Cosmere Unleashed with more Loomian's that have good abilities, such as a Spressolin, Tiklipse with its Total Eclipse ability, and so much more abilities. It's pretty versatile with what you can do with Cosmere Unleashed. Just make sure it's having paired up with Wall Breakers or at least offensive Loomians that have good abilities that Cosmere Unleashed can take advantage of. Now for the set, we are running Brawny, mainly because our speed stat is kind of, well, of course we do outspeed a bunch of Loomians, but for more specifically, there are a bunch of Loomians in the 100 or 100 plus speed tier range, so maxing out our damage would be a lot more better than potentially outspeeding those guys, because those Loomians are already running some form of nimble and very nimble, so it's not like we're gonna catch up to those Loomians anytime soon. And the TPs of 72 HP will make sure that it are leftovers and we can have as much HP as we can. Do notice that I do have Icicle Traps down here instead of Slumber. This is mainly because we're using Cosmere Unleashed in the late to end game of the battle, and while it can perform defensive niches such as swapping in on melee attacking Loomians like brawler types, we have to make sure that we're not going to be using Slumber a lot because it does leave us open and susceptible to setup. So Icicle Traps here is a little bit more better than Slumber. Do note that this is a sweeper. It's our main goal to do damage, not to tank hits. Cosmere Cracked is an exception to that because it's a lot more bulkier focused than Cosmere Unleashed. And on to Nevermare. Nevermare is going to be a very simple set as well. You want to run Nimble on this because its speed tier is very competitive, and when running Nimble, you can potentially outspeed most of the Loomians under you. It's also a cleaner, so you want to take advantage of that as much as possible. And your melee attack stat also wants to be maxed out because while 113 does seem a lot, because we're not running Brawny, we cannot have this stat as high as we want to, so running 200 will make that a little bit more better. 52 energy will allow us to use 3 bulk ups, and the rest will be Thistle and Phantom Slashes. You can also sneak Primal Slashes in there, so that's also going to be very nice. And your 48 HP will be leftovers, also making it sure that your HP is odd, so your Icicle Traps will be 5-hit KOs instead of 4-hit KOs. The item of choice will be Power Cuffs because we have a bunch of energy. We might as well use the Power Cuffs so we can maximize our damage of all 3 moves combined. And our ability of choice will be Razor Sharp. This is so we can try and crit more times. I wouldn't try and use the secret ability Nevermare, but if you do find some niche with Frenzy, then you obviously go ahead and use it. Alright, now on to Akalos. Akalos really has high base power moves now, so at least it's a little bit more interesting in order to know how to use Akalos, so it's pretty good for right now. So for the moveset for Akalos, you would want to run Ice Hammer, Wave Wrecker, Bronze Boost, Rogue Assault. This will make it so you have as much damage as possible, and the item of choice will of course be Power Cuffs. We do not have enough energy to abuse Power Cuffs such as other Loomians, but the energy here is good enough for us to abuse the Power Cuffs. And for our personality, we're going to want to run Brawny. This is so we can deal as much damage as possible, and our ability of choice will be aggressive, but if you don't have aggressive, Aqua Body is fine. It's not like Akalos is going to stay in much anyway, because once it kills something, there's going to be a revenge killer coming in, and because of our low speeds here, they're most likely going to outspeed and one-shot us. Now, for the rest of the moveset, you will be able to use 2 Bronze Boosts, and then the rest can be Ice Hammers and Wave Wreckers. You can try and sneak in a Rogue Assault here, but because Rogue Assault is not going to be used too much, it's only going to be used for metal types, I wouldn't really use that and just focus on Wave Wreckers and Ice Hammers. Next up, we have Gargolem, and this is going to be a UU version of Gargolem attack. Gargolem base, I used to be a big advocate for this because it was basically just a worse Gargolem attack, but was still pretty good with its coverage, but now I wouldn't really consider it using this over Gargolem attack. That's why this is a more of a UU variant, and thankfully, because the base stats for these 2 guys are similar, you can switch between these 2 guys if you are worried about that. Now, onto your personality. Your personality is going to be Nimble here, mainly because you want to outspeed as much as possible. However, if you want the master ability to make sure it boosts your range attack over your speed, then go Smart. However, Nimble is pretty fine here. And as for your moveset, Jetstream, Earthquake, Boom Bash, and Dark Surge are going to be your movesets of choice. Earthquake is going to be useful down here mainly because you can surprise opposing Infernixes, which is always nice, but if you want to stick to Landslide, that is perfectly fine. And for our energy, this will allow us to use 4 Jetstreams or Earthquakes, and then the rest can be 2 Dark Surges. The HP stat is also going to be 20 here. It's pretty much leftovers, and this will also allow us to get 5-hit KO'd by Icicle Traps. And then onto Gargolem attack. Not much of a difference here. Same set as the previous Gargolem form. And we'd want to run Jetstream, Earthquake, Boom Bash, Dark Surge. Same moveset here as well. The item of choice will be the Clutch Plushie because we are so freaking frail that we might as well take advantage of our moveset and try and spam these moves as much as possible. Do note that Gargolem attack will need a bunch of support in getting in, so pairing it up with pivots, baffles, or double switching will always be appreciated. And of course, the 20 HP here still works for Gargolem because with this energy, we'll still get 3-hit KO'd by Icicle Traps. And for Earthquake, it's going to be same thing as Gargolem regular, because with Gargolem attack in OU, Earthquake can help us get the jump on Loomians such as Venilin, who can live through our landslides but not Earthquake, but more importantly, Pyrolin. So this is going to be the final Loomian, and Celesting is going to be a defensive pivot set. This is mainly going to utilize our amount of speed, and while it does play a similar role to Namare, we're going to be having the ability to have stronger base stat moves with Metal Blast and Nova Blast, and having the ability to set up hazards. So the 8 energy here will allow us to set up 3 layers of barbs, 2 flat Metal Blasts, and the rest can be Flash and Freeze and Nova Blasts. Our 192 speed will let us outspeed a nimble 200 speed Shawchi, which is always nice. 40 range defense paired with a 200 HP will allow us to live 1 hit from a Gargolem, assuming they're not smart and not holding an Essence or Power Cuffs, so that's also going to be pretty great. And the 56 range attack is going to be Leftovers. Now, for Celesting, there aren't a lot of good single battle abilities, so you don't really have to worry about that. If you want to use Celesting in the double battles, then of course Mystic Tone is going to be the best ability for you, and your item of choice will be Health Amulet, because you do not have Rejuvenate unlike your other Metal Light counterpart Falkyrie, so having Recovery here is pretty much what you want to have. Alright, thank you guys for sticking around if you do and you wanted to check out the outro for some reason, but truly guys, thank you for sticking around. This video took hours to make, and even though I did release it relatively on time, this took up much of my day, but as long as you guys are somewhat happy and this serves as a way to help future LL players, and I know everyone's here for the set, but thank you guys. I cannot wait for what lies ahead of us in this channel's journey. Alright, this is Con and Soups signing off to remind you that Zuelong is still a dumpster fire.